The Prattfall Effect. The Prattfall Effect is the unsettling psychological phenomenon where a small mistake can make someone appear more attractive rather than less attractive. Most people believe attraction is built on looking flawless, saying the right things, and never revealing weaknesses. Yet the human mind often reacts in the opposite way. Sometimes a tiny imperfection creates a stronger emotional pull than perfection ever could. What makes this effect feel almost creepy is how invisible it is. Imagine meeting someone who seems to have everything. They are confident, charming, intelligent, and socially effortless. People admire them, but there is also a strange distance. They feel almost too perfect to relate to. Then something unexpected happens. They stumble over their words, laugh at an awkward moment, or accidentally reveal a harmless flaw. Instantly, something changes. The mind begins to see them differently. The perfection that once felt intimidating suddenly feels reachable. Their mistake acts like a secret doorway into their humanity. Without realizing it, people often become more emotionally invested after witnessing that flaw. This effect becomes especially powerful during attraction. A person who appears completely polished can feel impressive, but not necessarily approachable. A small mistake softens the image. It creates vulnerability, and vulnerability creates connection. The brain interprets the flaw as proof that the person is real rather than an impossible ideal. The disturbing part is that this process happens largely outside conscious awareness. People may genuinely believe they became interested because of personality, chemistry, or compatibility, while a tiny, embarrassing moment quietly influenced their perception. Some individuals even understand this effect well enough to strategically reveal imperfections, knowing that a carefully exposed flaw can sometimes create more attraction, trust, and emotional curiosity than appearing perfect ever could. The mere exposure effect. The mere exposure effect is the strange psychological phenomenon where people tend to develop feelings of attraction simply because they encounter someone repeatedly. The more often a face, voice, name, or presence appears in a person's life, the more familiar it becomes. And in the human mind, familiarity often feels surprisingly similar to attraction. What makes this effect unsettling is how easily it can influence emotions without permission. Most people like to believe they choose who they are drawn to based on personality, values, or chemistry. Yet sometimes feelings begin growing for a much simpler reason. Someone is simply there, again and again, quietly entering awareness until they start feeling important. The human brain is naturally cautious around the unfamiliar. New people require mental energy to evaluate. They represent uncertainty. Familiar people, however, feel safer. Every repeated encounter lowers psychological resistance. Over time, the mind begins associating that person with comfort rather than uncertainty. This is why someone you barely noticed at first can suddenly become difficult to stop thinking about. A classmate, coworker, neighbor, or acquaintance may initially leave little impression, yet after enough encounters, their presence starts to feel strangely significant. Their face becomes comforting, their absence becomes noticeable. What once felt ordinary begins to feel emotionally charged. The creepy part is that repeated exposure can create the illusion of deeper connection than actually exists. A person may feel attached to someone they hardly know simply because their brain has become accustomed to seeing them. Familiarity starts masquerading as compatibility. This effect becomes even more powerful in the digital world. Seeing the same person repeatedly on social media, through messages, photos, or videos can trigger similar feelings. The mind gradually lowers its defenses, often mistaking recognition for trust and familiarity for genuine emotional closeness. Before long, someone can feel surprisingly important without ever playing a meaningful role in your life. The Scarcity Effect. The scarcity effect is the unsettling psychological phenomenon where people often desire something more the moment it becomes difficult to obtain. The less available a person appears, the more valuable they can seem. Logic would suggest that attraction should be based on compatibility, trust, or genuine connection. Yet the human mind frequently becomes fascinated by what feels just out of reach. What makes this effect so powerful is that scarcity creates psychological tension. When something is constantly available, the brain adapts to its presence and begins to take it for granted. But when access becomes limited, attention suddenly intensifies. The mind starts focusing on what it might lose rather than what it already has. This is why someone who shows less availability can sometimes appear more attractive than someone offering consistent attention. Their limited presence creates uncertainty. Their replies become more meaningful. Their approval feels more valuable. Every interaction begins carrying greater emotional weight simply because it is less frequent. The disturbing part is that scarcity can completely distort perception. A person may become obsessed with someone not because that individual is exceptionally compatible, but because they are emotionally difficult to reach. The challenge itself becomes attractive. The brain starts interpreting rarity as value, even when there is little evidence that the connection is healthy. This effect is closely linked to loss aversion, a psychological tendency that makes people fear losing opportunities more than they value gaining them. The possibility that someone could disappear creates urgency. Suddenly, emotions become stronger, thoughts become more persistent, and attachment can grow faster than genuine intimacy. What makes the scarcity effect especially creepy is that it often operates beneath awareness. People believe they are pursuing a person because of deep feelings, while part of their attraction may simply be fueled by limited access. In some cases, individuals intentionally create distance, knowing that being less available can increase desire, curiosity, and emotional investment far more effectively than constant presence ever could. The reward uncertainty effect. The reward uncertainty effect is one of the most mysterious psychological forces behind attraction. It describes how people often become more emotionally attached when they are uncertain about how someone feels about them. Instead of losing interest when signals are mixed, the human mind can become even more focused, turning uncertainty into obsession. At first, this seems irrational. Most people assume that clear affection should create the strongest attraction, yet the brain does not always respond that way. When attention, affection, or validation arrives unpredictably, the mind begins searching for patterns. It wants answers, it wants certainty, and the harder certainty becomes to obtain, the more attention the brain dedicates to the person creating that uncertainty. This is what makes the effect so unsettling. Imagine someone who is warm and attentive one day, then distant and difficult to read the next. Their behavior creates a psychological puzzle. Instead of moving on, many people become increasingly invested in solving it. They replay conversations, analyze messages, and search for hidden meanings. The uncertainty keeps the person mentally present long after the interaction has ended. The reason this happens lies deep within the brain's reward system. Predictable rewards quickly become normal. Unpredictable rewards, however, trigger heightened anticipation. The brain remains alert because it never knows when the next positive interaction will arrive. This anticipation can become emotionally addictive. In attraction, a single unexpected compliment, a random message, or a rare moment of affection can feel far more powerful than constant attention. The inconsistency creates emotional highs that the mind begins craving. Over time, the person delivering these rewards can occupy a disproportionate amount of mental space. The creepy part is that people often mistake this emotional intensity for deep connection. They believe they are experiencing powerful feelings because the bond is special, when in reality, part of their attachment may be driven by uncertainty itself. Some individuals consciously or unconsciously exploit this effect, knowing that unpredictability can keep someone emotionally engaged far longer than steady affection ever could. The Ben Franklin Effect. The Ben Franklin Effect is the strange psychological phenomenon where people often grow to like someone more after doing that person a favor. Most people assume attraction and affection work in the opposite direction. We naturally believe that we help people because we like them. Yet the human mind can quietly reverse this process. Sometimes we begin liking people because we have already helped them. What makes this effect so unsettling is how it changes the way we understand emotional attachment. Imagine someone asks for a small favor. Maybe they need advice, assistance, support, or a little bit of your time. You agree and help them. Logically, nothing about that action should increase your feelings toward them. Yet your brain often starts looking for a reason to justify why you invested effort in the first place. The mind dislikes contradictions. If you willingly spent energy helping someone, your brain begins constructing a simple explanation. They must matter to you. Instead of seeing the favor as proof of your feelings, your brain starts using the favor to create those feelings. This effect becomes even stronger when the favor requires emotional effort. The more time, attention, or support someone receives from you, the more psychologically invested you may become. Every act of assistance quietly strengthens the connection in your own mind. The creepy part is that attachment can grow without the other person doing very much at all. You may find yourself thinking about them more often, caring more about their opinions, or feeling unusually connected simply because you have repeatedly invested in them. The relationship begins feeling valuable partly because of what you have given, not necessarily because of what you have received. Some people instinctively understand this dynamic. They know that asking for small favors can create closeness faster than constantly giving favors themselves. While it can build genuine bonds, it can also be used strategically, turning simple acts of help into powerful tools for creating emotional investment without people fully realizing why they feel so attached. The misattribution of arousal. The misattribution of arousal is one of the most unsettling psychological phenomena behind attraction. It occurs when people mistake the source of their emotional or physical excitement and incorrectly attribute those feelings to another person. In other words, what feels like attraction may sometimes be nothing more than the brain misreading its own signals. Most people believe they know exactly why they feel drawn to someone. They assume their racing heart, nervous excitement, and intense focus are proof of genuine chemistry. Yet the human brain is not always as accurate as it appears. When emotions become intense, it often searches for the most obvious explanation rather than the correct one. Imagine meeting someone while experiencing fear, excitement, stress, or adrenaline. Your heart is beating faster. Your palms are slightly sweaty. Your body feels alert and energized. Instead of recognizing the true source of those sensations, your brain may unconsciously connect them to the person standing in front of you. This is what makes the effect so eerie. The feeling of attraction can emerge from circumstances that have nothing to do with compatibility. A thrilling experience, a stressful situation, or even a moment of danger can intensify emotions and make another person seem far more appealing than they otherwise would. The brain is constantly trying to explain what the body is feeling. When it notices elevated arousal but lacks a clear explanation, it often creates one. The nearby person becomes the answer. Suddenly, they seem more interesting, more attractive, and more emotionally significant than before. The creepy part is that these feelings can feel completely authentic. The attraction is real because the emotions are real. What may not be real is the source. People can become convinced they have discovered a deep connection when part of their attachment is actually being fueled by excitement, anxiety, or adrenaline generated by something entirely unrelated. The mind quietly blends emotional intensity with attraction, making it difficult to tell where one ends and the other begins. The Similarity Attraction Effect. The Similarity Attraction Effect is the strange psychological phenomenon where people become more attracted to those who seem similar to themselves. At first glance, this appears harmless. Most people naturally enjoy being around others who share their interests, beliefs, experiences, or values. What makes this effect unsettling, however, is how quickly the human mind can interpret similarity as trust, compatibility, and even emotional connection. The brain is constantly searching for signs of safety. Every new person represents uncertainty, and uncertainty requires effort to evaluate. When someone appears similar to us, that uncertainty immediately decreases. They begin to feel familiar. Their thoughts seem easier to understand. Their actions feel more predictable. Without realizing it, we lower our defenses around them. This is where the effect becomes surprisingly powerful. Two people may share a favorite hobby, a similar childhood experience, the same sense of humor, or even a few matching opinions. Those similarities can create a feeling of closeness that feels much deeper than the actual relationship. The mind starts filling in gaps, assuming that if someone is similar in one area, they must be similar in many others. What makes this effect feel almost creepy is how easily it can distort perception. A person may overlook warning signs, incompatibilities, or differences simply because a few familiar traits trigger a sense of connection. Similarity creates comfort, and comfort often feels like attraction. The effect becomes even stronger when someone reflects our values, ambitions, fears, or emotional experiences. Seeing parts of ourselves in another person creates a powerful psychological bond. It feels validating. It feels reassuring. It feels as though we have found someone who truly understands us. The darker side is that some people consciously mirror interests, opinions, and personal experiences to create this feeling artificially. By appearing remarkably similar, they can trigger trust and emotional closeness far faster than genuine familiarity would normally allow. The mind begins seeing them as one of us, long before it truly knows who they are. The Reciprocity Principle. The Reciprocity Principle is one of the most powerful and unsettling psychological forces in human attraction. It describes the tendency for people to feel compelled to return what they receive. When someone gives attention, affection, kindness, or emotional investment, the receiving person often feels an unconscious pressure to respond in kind. What begins as a simple exchange can quietly shape feelings, decisions, and emotional attachments. Most people like to believe their emotions develop independently. They assume attraction grows because of genuine chemistry or compatibility. Yet the human mind is deeply influenced by reciprocity. When someone consistently makes us feel valued, listened to, or appreciated, we naturally feel an urge to give something back. Over time, that exchange can evolve into a much stronger emotional connection. What makes this effect so fascinating is how subtle it can be. Imagine someone remembers small details about your life, checks on you when you're struggling, or gives you their full attention when you speak. Each gesture may seem insignificant on its own, but the mind keeps track of these emotional investments. Gradually, you begin thinking about them more often. You start caring about how they feel. Their presence begins carrying emotional weight. The creepy part is that reciprocity can sometimes create feelings before genuine attraction fully exists. A person may find themselves becoming emotionally invested simply because someone else invested in them first. The mind starts searching for reasons to justify returning the attention, and those reasons can slowly transform into affection. This effect becomes even stronger when the giving feels personal or meaningful. Emotional support, vulnerability, and consistent care can create powerful psychological obligations. People often mistake this growing sense of connection for destiny or chemistry, when part of it may simply be the natural human desire to reciprocate. Some individuals understand this principle exceptionally well. They know that making someone feel special, appreciated, and emotionally supported can create a powerful pull. The result is a psychological cycle where giving and receiving steadily deepen attachment, often long before either person realizes how emotionally connected they have become. The halo effect. The halo effect is the unsettling psychological phenomenon where one positive trait causes people to assume a person possesses many other positive qualities, even when there is little evidence to support those assumptions. In attraction, this effect can be incredibly powerful because the mind often creates an entire story about someone based on a single impression. Most people believe they evaluate others rationally. They think they judge character, trustworthiness, intelligence, and compatibility based on careful observation. Yet the brain prefers shortcuts. When it notices one highly desirable quality, it often fills in the blanks automatically. A person may be attractive, confident, charming, successful, or charismatic, and suddenly they seem kinder, smarter, more trustworthy, and more emotionally compatible than they actually are. What makes this effect so creepy is how quickly it happens. Within seconds of meeting someone, the mind can construct a complete image that feels entirely real. A warm smile becomes evidence of kindness. Confidence becomes proof of competence. Physical attractiveness becomes a signal of good character. The brain quietly connects qualities that may have no real connection at all. This effect becomes especially dangerous during attraction because emotions can amplify the illusion. The more fascinated someone becomes, the more likely they are to overlook flaws and exaggerate strengths. Small positive traits begin casting a psychological glow over everything else. The person starts appearing almost flawless, not because they are, but because the mind has decided they must be. The disturbing part is that the halo effect often prevents people from seeing reality clearly. Red flags may be ignored. Warning signs may be rationalized away. Behaviors that would seem concerning in someone else suddenly appear acceptable because they are attached to a person already viewed positively. Some individuals naturally benefit from this effect, while others learn to use it deliberately. They understand that creating one strong positive impression can influence how people interpret everything that follows. Once the halo forms, the mind begins protecting it, turning a single attractive quality into an entire fantasy that feels remarkably difficult to question. The contrast effect. The contrast effect is the eerie psychological phenomenon where the way we perceive someone is heavily influenced by the people we have encountered before them. Rather than judging a person on their own merits, the human mind often evaluates them by comparison. This means attraction is not always about who someone is, but about who they are standing next to in our memory. Most people believe attraction is a direct reaction to another person's qualities. They assume they are seeing someone objectively. Yet the brain rarely works that way. It constantly compares, ranks, and evaluates. A person's attractiveness, charm, confidence, or desirability can seem dramatically different depending on what the mind has recently experienced. What makes this effect so unsettling is how invisible it is. Imagine meeting someone after spending time around people who were rude, distant, or emotionally unavailable. Suddenly, an average level of kindness can feel extraordinary. Basic attention can feel deeply meaningful. The contrast creates the illusion that the person is more exceptional than they might otherwise appear. The same thing happens after heartbreak or disappointment. When someone enters your life shortly after a painful experience, their positive qualities can seem magnified. The mind compares them to what came before and interprets the difference as a powerful sign of compatibility. In reality, part of the attraction may be coming from the comparison itself. The creepy part is that people often mistake contrast for chemistry. They believe they have found someone uniquely special when their perception has been shaped by previous experiences. The brain focuses less on who the person actually is and more on how different they feel from someone else. This effect becomes even more powerful because comparisons rarely happen consciously. A person may never realize they are measuring someone against an ex, a past rejection, or a disappointing relationship. Yet those comparisons quietly influence attraction, making ordinary qualities seem extraordinary and causing emotions to grow much faster than genuine understanding ever could. The Zeigarnik Effect. The Zeigarnik Effect is the unsettling psychological phenomenon where unfinished experiences remain trapped in the mind far longer than completed ones. The human brain has a strange tendency to hold on to unanswered questions, unresolved emotions, and incomplete stories. What is finished can often be forgotten. What remains unfinished, however, can become impossible to ignore. This becomes especially powerful in attraction and emotional attachment. Most people assume they think about someone because that person is important. Sometimes that is true. But other times, the mind is simply reacting to a lack of closure. An unanswered message, a sudden disappearance, mixed signals, or a relationship that ended without explanation can create a psychological loop that refuses to close. What makes this effect so creepy is how persistent it can be. The brain treats unfinished emotional experiences like open tabs that continue running in the background. Even when someone tries to move on, their mind keeps returning to the same questions. What happened? What were they really thinking? What could I have done differently? Why did it end that way? The search for answers becomes emotionally consuming. People replay conversations, analyze tiny details, and revisit old memories, hoping to find the missing piece that will finally quiet their thoughts. Yet the more incomplete the story feels, the harder it becomes to let go. This is why someone who provided very little genuine connection can sometimes occupy more mental space than someone who offered real love and consistency. The mind is not always chasing the person. It is chasing completion. It wants the story to make sense. The disturbing part is that unresolved situations often feel more significant than they truly are. The brain mistakes unfinished business for emotional importance. A relationship that never fully developed can become romanticized because it never reached a clear ending. The mystery remains alive, and as long as the questions remain unanswered, the mind keeps returning to them, desperately trying to finish a story that may never provide the ending it wants. The commitment bias. The commitment bias is the unsettling psychological phenomenon where people become increasingly attached to a person simply because they have already invested time, effort, emotions, or resources into them. The more someone gives, the harder it becomes to walk away. What makes this effect so powerful is that the attachment often grows independently of whether the connection is actually healthy or rewarding. Most people believe they stay because of love, attraction, or compatibility. Yet the human mind has a deep resistance to abandoning something it has already invested in. Once effort has been spent, the brain begins treating that investment as something that must be protected. Leaving starts to feel like losing everything that was already given. This is where the effect becomes disturbing. Imagine spending months thinking about someone, supporting them, prioritizing them, and emotionally investing in the possibility of a future. Even if the connection becomes disappointing, the mind struggles to let go. Instead of evaluating the situation based on what is happening now, it becomes fixated on everything that has already been invested. The brain quietly asks a dangerous question: what if all that effort was for nothing? That question alone can keep people emotionally attached far longer than they should be. Rather than accepting a painful reality, the mind often doubles down. It convinces itself that more patience, more effort, or more sacrifice will eventually justify everything that has already been invested. The creepy part is that commitment can create the illusion of deeper feelings. A person may believe they are becoming more attached because the connection is growing stronger, when in reality, they are becoming attached to their own investment. The relationship begins feeling valuable partly because of everything they have poured into it. Some individuals consciously or unconsciously benefit from this effect. They accept attention, emotional support, and repeated effort while giving very little in return. As investment grows, the other person's attachment often grows with it. The result is a psychological trap, where the more someone sacrifices, the more difficult it becomes for them to recognize that they may be holding on to the investment rather than the person themselves. The investment model. The investment model is the unsettling psychological phenomenon that explains why people often remain emotionally attached long after attraction, happiness, or compatibility begins to fade. According to this principle, commitment is not determined solely by how much someone loves another person. It is also shaped by how much they have invested and how much they believe they would lose by walking away. Most people assume that strong relationships survive because the feelings remain strong. Yet the human mind often operates differently. The more time, energy, emotions, memories, sacrifices, and effort someone invests into a connection, the more psychologically valuable that connection becomes. Even when problems appear, the weight of those investments can make leaving feel almost impossible. What makes this effect so creepy is that the attachment can become disconnected from present reality. Imagine someone who has spent years building a connection, sharing experiences, making sacrifices, and imagining a future with another person. Even if the relationship becomes disappointing, those accumulated investments continue exerting pressure on the mind. The brain begins focusing on everything that would be lost: the memories, the emotional effort, the dreams that were built together, the time that can never be recovered. Suddenly, ending the relationship feels less like moving on and more like destroying a part of one's own history. This effect becomes even stronger when alternatives seem uncertain. The mind starts comparing the known pain of staying with the unknown risks of leaving. Because uncertainty feels threatening, many people remain committed to situations that no longer make them happy. The disturbing part is that investments often create emotional blindness. A person may recognize the problems clearly, yet still feel unable to leave. Their commitment is no longer fueled solely by what they are receiving. It is fueled by everything they have already given. Some individuals become trapped in relationships, not because the connection is thriving, but because the investments have become so enormous that walking away feels psychologically unbearable. The mind keeps searching for reasons to stay, desperately hoping that future rewards will justify everything it has already sacrificed. The matching hypothesis. The matching hypothesis is the strange psychological phenomenon suggesting that people are often drawn toward individuals they perceive as being similar to themselves in overall desirability. While many people believe attraction is completely unpredictable, the human mind quietly evaluates where it stands in the social world and often seeks connections that feel realistically attainable. What makes this effect unsettling is that it operates largely beneath awareness. Most people do not consciously rank themselves or others. Yet the brain is constantly gathering information about appearance, confidence, social status, popularity, intelligence, charisma, and other traits. It uses these observations to estimate the likelihood of acceptance or rejection. This is where the effect becomes fascinating. Someone may feel intense attraction toward a person they consider highly desirable, but they may never act on those feelings because their mind predicts rejection. At the same time, they may feel unexpectedly comfortable around someone they perceive as being on a similar level. That comfort often creates opportunities for emotional connection that attraction alone cannot. The creepy part is that attraction is not always driven by who people want most. It is often influenced by who feels possible. The brain naturally seeks situations where emotional risk appears manageable. A person who seems too far out of reach may trigger anxiety, insecurity, or self-doubt, while someone perceived as similar creates a sense of psychological safety. This effect can quietly shape romantic choices without people realizing it. Many individuals believe they are following their hearts when part of their decision-making is being guided by subconscious calculations about acceptance and compatibility. The mind is constantly asking whether a connection feels balanced. What makes the matching hypothesis particularly eerie is that perception matters more than reality. A person's self-image can dramatically influence who they pursue, who they avoid, and who they believe could genuinely want them. Sometimes people miss meaningful opportunities because they underestimate themselves. Other times, they become attached to someone largely because that person makes acceptance feel possible, creating a powerful emotional pull that feels like destiny when it may simply be the brain seeking equilibrium. The Familiarity Bias. The familiarity bias is the unsettling psychological phenomenon where people naturally develop trust, comfort, and attraction toward what feels familiar, even when that familiarity may not actually be good for them. The human mind is constantly searching for safety, and one of its strongest shortcuts is recognizing what it has encountered before. What feels familiar often feels right, regardless of whether it truly is. What makes this effect so creepy is that familiarity can quietly override logic. A person may meet someone new who treats them with kindness, respect, and consistency, yet feel little emotional spark. At the same time, they may feel intensely drawn to someone whose behavior resembles experiences from their past, even if those experiences were painful. The brain does not always distinguish between familiarity and healthiness. It simply recognizes patterns. When someone reminds us of previous relationships, childhood experiences, emotional dynamics, or familiar personalities, they trigger a sense of recognition. That recognition creates comfort, and comfort can easily be mistaken for connection. This is why people sometimes find themselves repeatedly attracted to the same type of person. The faces may change, but the emotional patterns remain remarkably similar. The mind keeps returning to what it understands, even when those patterns lead to disappointment. Familiarity feels predictable, and predictability feels safe. The disturbing part is that people often interpret this feeling as chemistry. They believe they have found someone uniquely special when part of their attraction may simply come from recognizing an emotional pattern they have encountered before. The connection feels powerful because it activates something deeply familiar inside them. This effect becomes even stronger when emotions are involved. Familiar voices, behaviors, communication styles, and emotional dynamics can create an immediate sense of closeness. The brain relaxes around what it recognizes, lowering defenses and increasing trust before genuine understanding has had time to develop. Some individuals unconsciously benefit from this effect simply by reminding others of someone important from their past. The result is a strange psychological illusion where familiarity begins masquerading as compatibility, making people feel deeply connected to someone they barely know, simply because that person feels like a story their mind has already read before. The Proximity Effect. The proximity effect is the strange psychological phenomenon where people become more emotionally attached to those they encounter frequently. Simply being near someone on a regular basis can dramatically increase the chances of attraction, trust, and emotional connection. What makes this effect unsettling is how little control people often have over it. Sometimes feelings grow not because someone is uniquely compatible, but because they happen to be present. Most people believe attraction develops because of personality, chemistry, or shared values. While those factors certainly matter, the human brain is heavily influenced by repeated contact. The more often someone appears in your environment, the more familiar they become. Their presence slowly shifts from being noticed to being expected. Eventually, their absence becomes noticeable. What makes this effect feel almost creepy is how gradually it unfolds. A person who barely caught your attention at first can become increasingly important simply because they are consistently nearby. A familiar face starts feeling comforting. Small interactions begin carrying emotional significance. The mind quietly builds a connection long before it consciously recognizes what is happening. The reason this occurs lies in the brain's preference for certainty and predictability. Familiar people require less mental effort to understand than strangers. Each encounter reduces uncertainty and increases comfort. Over time, that comfort can transform into genuine attachment. The disturbing part is that proximity can create the illusion of compatibility. A person may feel deeply connected to someone largely because they see them regularly, not because they truly know them. The repeated exposure creates a sense of closeness that feels authentic, even when the relationship itself remains relatively shallow. This effect becomes especially powerful because the brain often confuses accessibility with importance. Someone who is constantly present naturally occupies more mental space. They become part of daily routines, thoughts, and expectations. As that presence grows, emotional investment often follows. The proximity effect reveals something unsettling about human nature. Sometimes people become significant not because they are extraordinary, but because they are there. Day after day, encounter after encounter, the mind slowly transforms familiarity into attachment, often without realizing that simple proximity may be driving emotions far more than genuine connection ever was. The Attachment Activation Effect. The Attachment Activation Effect is the unsettling psychological phenomenon where certain people can instantly awaken deep emotional needs that have been quietly dormant beneath the surface. These needs often revolve around closeness, reassurance, acceptance, security, and fear of loss. What makes this effect so powerful is that it can transform an ordinary interaction into something emotionally intense long before a genuine bond has had time to form. Most people believe attraction develops gradually through shared experiences and growing connection. Yet sometimes a person appears and triggers something much deeper. A particular smile, voice, behavior, or emotional dynamic can activate old attachment patterns that have been shaping someone's relationships for years without their awareness. What makes this effect feel almost creepy is how quickly it can happen. A person may barely know someone, yet find themselves thinking about them constantly. Their messages suddenly matter. Their approval feels unusually important. Their attention creates excitement, while their distance creates anxiety. The emotional reaction seems far larger than the actual relationship. The reason this occurs is that the brain is not only responding to the person in front of it, it is also responding to emotional needs and experiences formed long ago. Certain individuals unconsciously resemble familiar attachment patterns, causing the mind to react as though something deeply significant is at stake. This effect becomes especially intense when the person provides moments of emotional closeness followed by uncertainty. The brain interprets these interactions as highly important and begins prioritizing them. Thoughts become repetitive. Emotions become amplified. The person starts occupying a disproportionate amount of mental space. The disturbing part is that people often mistake attachment activation for destiny or extraordinary chemistry. They assume the intensity proves the connection is special. In reality, part of that intensity may be coming from old emotional systems being triggered rather than from the actual relationship itself. Some individuals can awaken feelings that seem impossible to ignore, not because they are uniquely compatible, but because they activate powerful psychological needs that were already waiting beneath the surface. The result is a connection that feels overwhelming, urgent, and deeply meaningful, even when the relationship itself is still largely unknown. The Emotional Contagion Effect. The emotional contagion effect is the eerie psychological phenomenon where people unconsciously absorb and mirror the emotions of those around them. Without realizing it, human beings constantly influence each other's emotional states. A person's mood, energy, and emotional presence can spread from one mind to another like an invisible force, shaping feelings in ways that often go completely unnoticed. What makes this effect so unsettling is how little awareness people have of it. Most individuals believe their emotions belong entirely to them. They assume their happiness, anxiety, excitement, or sadness originates from their own thoughts and experiences. Yet the human brain is constantly monitoring others for emotional cues, quietly adjusting its own emotional state in response. Imagine spending time with someone who is confident, calm, and emotionally secure. Their presence alone can make you feel more relaxed and comfortable. On the other hand, someone who is anxious, stressed, or emotionally unpredictable can leave you feeling unsettled without ever saying anything directly. Their emotions silently influence your own. This happens because the brain is wired for social synchronization. Humans evolved in groups, making it beneficial to quickly detect and reflect the emotions of others. As a result, people often begin matching emotional states automatically. Excitement creates excitement. Anxiety creates anxiety. Warmth creates warmth. The creepy part is that attraction can sometimes be shaped by emotional contagion rather than genuine compatibility. A person who consistently makes you feel emotionally elevated may seem incredibly attractive, even if you cannot explain why. Their emotional state becomes associated with them, causing your brain to interpret those positive feelings as evidence of a special connection. This effect becomes especially powerful in close relationships. Over time, people begin sharing emotional patterns, moods, and reactions. The boundaries between their emotional worlds become blurred. Without noticing it, one person's emotional state can start controlling the atmosphere of the entire connection. The result is a powerful psychological bond where emotions spread silently, influencing attraction, attachment, and behavior long before either person realizes what is happening. The self-expansion theory. The self-expansion theory is the fascinating psychological phenomenon where people become attracted to those who make them feel larger, more capable, or more alive than they were before. At its core, the theory suggests that human beings are constantly seeking growth. They want new experiences, new perspectives, and new versions of themselves. Sometimes attraction is not just about the other person. It is about who that person allows them to become. What makes this effect so unsettling is that the feelings it creates can be incredibly intense. A person enters your life, and suddenly the world feels bigger. New ideas appear. New possibilities emerge. Conversations feel stimulating. Experiences become more exciting. Without realizing it, your sense of identity begins expanding through your connection with them. The brain finds this deeply rewarding. Every new experience shared with that person becomes linked to them emotionally. Adventures, discoveries, challenges, and moments of personal growth all strengthen the association. The mind starts viewing that individual not merely as a companion, but as a gateway to a larger version of itself. This is where the effect becomes almost eerie. A person may begin feeling emotionally dependent on someone because that individual has become connected to their growth. Their presence feels energizing. Their absence feels like something important is missing. It can become difficult to separate genuine affection from the excitement of personal expansion. The creepy part is that people often mistake growth for compatibility. They believe they have found the perfect connection because they feel transformed. In reality, part of their attraction may be rooted in the way the relationship makes them feel about themselves. This effect becomes even stronger when someone introduces you to experiences you never imagined, challenges your assumptions, or helps you discover hidden strengths. The more your identity expands through the connection, the more valuable that person can seem. Over time, the relationship begins feeling larger than the individual themselves. They become associated with possibility, transformation, and personal evolution. The mind starts viewing them as part of its own growth story, creating an emotional bond that can feel profound, addictive, and remarkably difficult to let go of. The vulnerability loop. The vulnerability loop is the powerful psychological phenomenon where emotional closeness grows through the gradual exchange of personal truths. It begins when one person reveals something genuine about themselves, a fear, insecurity, painful memory, secret hope, or hidden struggle. When the other person responds with understanding rather than judgment, a subtle psychological bond is formed. That bond often encourages even deeper sharing, creating a cycle that steadily intensifies emotional connection. What makes this effect so fascinating is how quickly it can transform strangers into people who feel deeply significant. Most relationships begin on the surface, with safe conversations and carefully controlled impressions. But the moment vulnerability enters the interaction, something changes. The masks begin to slip. the conversation feels more real. The emotional distance starts shrinking. The human mind is naturally cautious about revealing its weaknesses. Vulnerability carries risk because rejection, criticism, or betrayal are always possible. When someone accepts a vulnerable disclosure without using it against us, the brain interprets that response as a powerful sign of safety. Trust begins to grow. This is where the loop forms. One person shares something personal. The other person responds with understanding and shares something meaningful in return. Each act of vulnerability encourages another. With every exchange, emotional walls become lower and emotional investment becomes stronger. The creepy part is that this process can create an intense sense of connection long before people truly know each other. Deep conversations can make someone feel uniquely understood, even when the relationship is still relatively new. The emotional intensity creates the impression that the bond is extraordinary. This effect becomes even more powerful because vulnerability often feels exclusive. When someone shares parts of themselves that few others get to see, it creates a feeling of special access. The mind begins attaching significance to the connection. Before long, two people can feel profoundly intertwined, not because of how long they have known each other, but because of how deeply they have allowed each other into their emotional worlds. The Intermittent Reinforcement Effect. The intermittent reinforcement effect is one of the most unsettling psychological forces behind obsession and emotional attachment. It occurs when affection, attention, validation, or rewards are given unpredictably rather than consistently. Instead of weakening attraction, this inconsistency can often make a person think about someone even more. At first, this seems completely illogical. Most people assume that consistent affection should create the strongest bonds. Yet the human brain is strangely vulnerable to uncertainty. When rewards arrive randomly, the mind becomes intensely focused on predicting when the next positive moment will occur. The uncertainty itself becomes emotionally captivating. What makes this effect so creepy is how deeply it can take hold. Imagine someone who is incredibly attentive one day, then distant the next. They send thoughtful messages, disappear for a while, then suddenly return with warmth and affection. Each positive interaction feels exciting because it is unexpected. The brain starts anticipating the next reward, constantly wondering when it will arrive. The reason this happens lies within the brain's reward system. Predictable rewards eventually become normal. Unpredictable rewards remain exciting because the mind never fully adapts to them. Every unexpected moment of attention feels more valuable than it actually is. The emotional highs become amplified. This effect can create powerful emotional fixation. A person may find themselves repeatedly checking messages, replaying conversations, or thinking constantly about someone who provides inconsistent attention. The uncertainty keeps the brain engaged, even when the relationship itself offers very little stability. The disturbing part is that people often mistake this intensity for genuine connection. They believe their strong emotions prove the relationship is meaningful when part of the attachment is being fueled by the unpredictability itself. The emotional roller coaster creates highs and lows that feel significant, even if the foundation is weak. Some individuals use this effect consciously, while others create it unintentionally through inconsistent behavior. Either way, the result can be remarkably powerful. The mind becomes trapped between hope and uncertainty, chasing moments of affection that arrive just often enough to keep the emotional investment alive. The peak end rule. The peak end rule is the unsettling psychological phenomenon where people judge an entire experience based primarily on two moments: the most emotionally intense point and the way it ended. Rather than remembering every detail equally, the human mind compresses experiences into highlights. What felt strongest and what happened last often become the story the brain remembers. What makes this effect so creepy is that it can completely reshape how someone feels about another person. Most people assume their feelings are based on the full reality of a relationship. They believe they are evaluating all the moments, conversations, and experiences together. Yet the brain often ignores much of that information and focuses instead on a few emotionally powerful memories. Imagine a connection that was mostly ordinary but included one incredibly exciting, romantic, or emotionally intense moment. That single peak can become disproportionately important in memory. The brain gives it extra weight, causing the entire relationship to feel more meaningful than it may have actually been. The same thing happens with endings. A relationship could contain months of confusion, inconsistency, or disappointment. But if it ends with a heartfelt conversation, a dramatic reunion, or an emotional declaration, the mind may remember it far more positively. Conversely, a generally healthy connection can be overshadowed by a painful ending that colors every memory that came before it. This is where the effect becomes disturbing. People often fall in love with their memories rather than the reality of what happened. They become emotionally attached to a peak moment or haunted by an ending, allowing those memories to define the entire experience. The brain naturally seeks simple narratives. Instead of storing every detail, it creates shortcuts. The most intense moment becomes the emotional anchor. The ending becomes the final chapter. Together, they shape how the entire story is remembered. The eerie part is that someone can continue missing a person, not because the relationship was consistently fulfilling, but because a few powerful moments dominate their memory. The mind quietly edits the past, turning emotional peaks and endings into something far larger than the complete reality ever was. The social proof effect. The social proof effect is the unsettling psychological phenomenon where people become more attracted to someone simply because other people appear to value them. Instead of relying entirely on personal judgment, the human mind often looks to others for clues about who is desirable, trustworthy, or worth pursuing. What makes this effect so powerful is that it can influence attraction without people even realizing it. Most individuals believe their feelings are completely their own. They assume attraction develops through personal experiences and genuine connection, yet the brain is constantly gathering social information from the environment. When it sees that a person is admired, wanted, respected, or desired by others, it often interprets that attention as evidence of value. This is where the effect becomes surprisingly eerie. A person may seem relatively ordinary until they receive attention from others. Suddenly, they appear more interesting, more attractive, more important. The fact that others want them begins altering how they are perceived. The reason this happens lies in the brain's need to reduce uncertainty. Evaluating people takes effort and carries risk. If many others seem interested in someone, the mind treats that interest as a shortcut. It assumes there must be something valuable there. The collective attention acts like a signal that the person is worth noticing. The creepy part is that attraction can sometimes increase without the individual changing at all. Their personality remains the same. Their appearance remains the same. The only thing that changes is how many people seem to appreciate them. Yet that alone can dramatically shift perception. This effect becomes especially powerful in social environments where status and popularity are visible. Attention from friends, admiration from peers, or interest from multiple people can create an aura of desirability that feels difficult to resist. The mind begins associating social approval with personal value. The disturbing reality is that people are not always attracted solely to who someone is. Sometimes they are attracted to how others react to them. The social proof effect quietly transforms collective attention into individual desire, making a person seem more captivating simply because the crowd has already decided they matter. The uncertainty attraction effect. The uncertainty attraction effect is the eerie psychological phenomenon where people often become more emotionally attached when they are unsure how someone truly feels about them. Logic suggests that certainty should create the strongest attraction. Knowing that someone likes you should feel comforting and secure. Yet the human mind does not always operate according to logic. In many cases, uncertainty becomes the very thing that fuels obsession. What makes this effect so unsettling is how it quietly takes control of attention. When feelings are clear, the brain can relax. It understands the situation and no longer needs to search for answers. But when someone's intentions remain ambiguous, the mind becomes trapped in a cycle of analysis. Every message, glance, conversation, and interaction suddenly feels important. The brain begins searching for clues. Did they mean something by that comment? Why did they reply so quickly yesterday but take hours today? Were they flirting or simply being friendly? These unanswered questions create mental loops that are surprisingly difficult to escape. This is where the effect becomes powerful. The uncertainty itself keeps the person constantly present in your thoughts. The mind naturally focuses on unresolved situations because it wants closure. As a result, Someone who provides mixed signals can occupy far more mental space than someone who consistently expresses interest. The creepy part is that people often mistake this mental preoccupation for deep attraction. They believe they are thinking about the person because the connection is extraordinary. In reality, part of their fixation may be driven by the uncertainty surrounding the relationship. The mystery becomes emotionally addictive. This effect becomes even stronger because occasional signs of interest create hope. Just when the mind begins doubting, a compliment, message, or moment of closeness appears. Those small rewards keep the uncertainty alive and encourage further emotional investment. The disturbing reality is that uncertainty can sometimes generate stronger feelings than certainty ever could. The brain becomes fascinated by what it cannot fully understand, transforming unanswered questions into emotional intensity and making someone seem far more important simply because they remain impossible to completely figure out. The forbidden fruit effect. The forbidden fruit effect is the unsettling psychological phenomenon where people become more attracted to someone precisely because they feel they should not have them. The moment access becomes restricted, forbidden, or socially discouraged, desire often grows stronger. What is available can seem ordinary. What is forbidden can become irresistible. At first, this makes little sense. Logic suggests that obstacles should reduce attraction. If something is difficult, risky, or unattainable, people should naturally move on. Yet the human mind frequently reacts in the opposite way. Restrictions can transform ordinary interest into intense fascination. What makes this effect so creepy is that the attraction often has less to do with the person and more to do with the barrier itself. The moment someone becomes off-limits, unavailable, or forbidden, the brain starts assigning greater value to them. The restriction creates psychological tension. The mind becomes fixated on what it cannot easily have. This is why people sometimes find themselves obsessing over someone who is already committed to another relationship, emotionally unavailable, physically distant, or socially inappropriate. The obstacle itself becomes part of the attraction. Every barrier increases the sense that there is something valuable on the other side. The brain interprets restrictions as signals of rarity and importance. If access is limited, there must be a reason. That assumption can cause desire to intensify far beyond what the actual connection would normally justify. The disturbing part is that forbidden attraction often feels extraordinarily powerful. The secrecy, risk, and difficulty create emotional intensity that can easily be mistaken for deep compatibility. People begin believing they have found a rare connection when part of what they are experiencing is simply the excitement of crossing a boundary. This effect becomes even stronger because the mind romanticizes what it cannot fully possess. The lack of access leaves room for imagination. Flaws become invisible. Fantasies grow stronger. The person slowly transforms into an idealized figure rather than a real human being. The forbidden fruit effect reveals something unsettling about human nature. Sometimes the strongest desire is not created by what is available to us, but by what we are told we cannot have. The barrier itself becomes part of the attraction, turning restriction into temptation and curiosity into obsession. The Romeo and Juliet effect. The Romeo and Juliet effect is the unsettling psychological phenomenon where opposition, disapproval, or obstacles can actually strengthen attraction rather than weaken it. Instead of pulling two people apart, resistance sometimes pushes them closer together. The more a connection is challenged, the more emotionally intense it can become. At first, this seems completely irrational. Most people assume that outside pressure should make a relationship harder to maintain. Constant obstacles, criticism, or interference should create doubt and distance. Yet, the human mind often responds differently. When something valuable feels threatened, people tend to fight harder to protect it. What makes this effect so creepy is how quickly opposition can transform ordinary feelings into powerful emotional attachment. Imagine two people who are told they should not be together. Suddenly, every interaction feels more meaningful. Every moment together feels more valuable. The relationship begins taking on a sense of urgency and importance that may not have existed before. The reason this happens lies deep within human psychology. Restrictions trigger a desire to reclaim freedom and control. When others attempt to limit a connection, the mind often reacts by increasing its emotional commitment to that connection. The relationship becomes more than a relationship. It becomes a symbol of personal choice. This is where the effect becomes dangerous. The struggle itself can start fueling attraction. People become united against a common obstacle, creating a feeling of closeness and purpose. The challenge makes the connection feel special, even if the underlying compatibility remains largely untested. The creepy part is that individuals often mistake resistance for proof of true love. They assume the intensity must mean the relationship is extraordinary because they are willing to fight for it. In reality, some of that emotional intensity may be generated by the opposition itself. As barriers grow, so can idealization. The relationship begins feeling larger than life. Flaws become easier to ignore because attention is focused on overcoming obstacles. The mind starts viewing the connection as something rare and precious simply because it is difficult. The Romeo and Juliet effect reveals a disturbing truth about attraction. Sometimes the very forces that should weaken a bond can strengthen it. The more the world pushes against a connection, the more valuable that connection can appear, turning resistance into passion and obstacles into emotional fuel. The need for closure. The need for closure is the unsettling psychological phenomenon where people become emotionally trapped by unanswered questions, unresolved feelings, and incomplete endings. The human mind craves certainty. It wants explanations, conclusions, and clear answers. When those answers are missing, the brain often refuses to let go, keeping a person emotionally present long after they have physically disappeared. What makes this effect so creepy is that it can create attachment where attachment should have ended. Most people assume they keep thinking about someone because they still have strong feelings for them. Sometimes that is true, but other times the mind is not chasing the person, it is chasing the answer. Imagine a connection that suddenly changes without explanation. Messages stop. Feelings become unclear. A relationship ends with vague words instead of honest reasons. The brain immediately begins searching for missing information. What happened? What changed? Was it something I did? Could it have been different? The problem is that the human mind hates uncertainty. Unanswered questions feel like unfinished business. Instead of accepting the lack of answers, the brain repeatedly revisits the situation, hoping to find meaning hidden somewhere in the memories. This is where the effect becomes powerful. The more uncertain the ending, the more mental space it often occupies. A brief relationship with no explanation can sometimes haunt someone longer than a long relationship with a clear ending. The lack of closure keeps the psychological door open. The disturbing part is that people frequently mistake this mental fixation for love. They believe they cannot move on because the connection was special. In reality, part of what they are experiencing may be the brain's desperate attempt to resolve uncertainty. The need for closure becomes even stronger because the mind naturally creates stories when answers are unavailable. It imagines possibilities, replays conversations, and searches for clues that may not exist. The person becomes emotionally frozen between what happened and what they wish they knew. The result is a psychological trap where the absence of answers keeps someone emotionally alive in your mind. Not because the relationship continues, but because the brain cannot stop trying to finish a story that never received a proper ending. The Limerance Pattern. The Limerance Pattern is one of the most unsettling psychological states a person can experience. It is an intense form of emotional fixation where someone becomes consumed by thoughts of another person, often to the point where that individual dominates their mental world. Unlike genuine love, limerence is driven by longing, uncertainty, fantasy, and the desperate desire for emotional reciprocation. What makes this phenomenon so creepy is how completely it can take over the mind. A person may wake up thinking about someone, spend the day analyzing interactions with them, and fall asleep replaying conversations that happened weeks ago. Every message, glance, social media activity, or small gesture becomes loaded with meaning. The brain enters a state of constant vigilance. It searches for signs of hope, rejection, affection, or hidden feelings. Tiny details that would normally be forgotten become emotionally significant. A simple smile can create euphoria. A delayed response can trigger anxiety. Emotional highs and lows become extreme. This is where the pattern becomes dangerous. The person at the center of limerence often becomes idealized. Their flaws fade into the background while their positive qualities become magnified. The mind fills in gaps with fantasy, creating a version of them that may not fully exist in reality. The disturbing part is that limerence thrives on uncertainty. Clear rejection often hurts, but ambiguity can be even more powerful. Mixed signals, inconsistent attention, and unanswered questions keep the emotional cycle alive. The mind remains trapped because it believes the next interaction could finally provide the answer it craves. Many people mistake limerence for deep love because the emotions feel overwhelming. The thoughts are constant, the desire is intense, the connection feels unique. Yet much of the intensity comes from obsession, anticipation, and emotional uncertainty rather than genuine intimacy. The eerie reality is that someone can become the center of your emotional universe without ever truly knowing you. The attachment grows not from who they are, but from what they represent inside your imagination. The mind becomes addicted to possibility, turning hope into fixation and curiosity into emotional captivity. The mate value perception. The mate value perception is the unsettling psychological phenomenon where attraction is influenced not only by who a person is, but by how valuable they are perceived to be. The human mind is constantly making hidden judgments about desirability, often evaluating qualities such as confidence, status, social influence, attractiveness, intelligence, ambition, and emotional stability. What makes this effect so eerie is that these evaluations often happen automatically, long before conscious decisions are made. Most people believe attraction is based purely on personal feelings. They assume they are responding to chemistry, connection, or compatibility. Yet beneath the surface, the brain is quietly assessing how desirable someone appears within the social environment. These perceptions shape attraction in ways most people never notice. What makes this effect so creepy is that perception often matters more than reality. A person does not necessarily need to possess extraordinary qualities. They only need to appear valuable. Confidence can be mistaken for competence. Popularity can be mistaken for character. Social attention can be mistaken for genuine worth. The mind frequently uses shortcuts when evaluating people. This effect becomes especially powerful because people naturally compare themselves to others. The brain constantly measures potential partners against its own perceived value. Questions arise beneath awareness. Are they likely to choose me? Am I good enough for them? Do they seem within reach or beyond reach? These hidden calculations can dramatically influence attraction. Someone perceived as highly desirable may generate intense interest simply because they appear difficult to obtain. Their value creates emotional significance before any meaningful connection has even formed. The disturbing part is that people often become attracted to what someone represents rather than who they truly are. They become captivated by status, attention, admiration, or social approval. The image begins overshadowing the individual. This phenomenon can create powerful emotional illusions. A person may feel overwhelming attraction not because of genuine compatibility, but because the mind has assigned extraordinary value to someone. The result is a psychological trap where perception quietly shapes desire, making people chase an idealized image while believing they are pursuing a real connection. The availability heuristic. The availability heuristic is the unsettling psychological phenomenon where people judge reality based on whatever information comes to mind most easily. Instead of carefully evaluating all the facts, the brain relies on the memories, emotions, and experiences that are most accessible. What makes this effect so creepy is that it can dramatically influence attraction without a person ever realizing it. Most people believe their feelings are based on objective reality. They assume they are seeing someone clearly and making rational judgments about them. Yet the human mind often takes shortcuts. When thinking about another person, it naturally focuses on the memories that are easiest to recall rather than the complete picture. This is where the effect becomes powerful. Imagine someone who gave you a few incredibly memorable moments. Perhaps they made you feel special, created intense excitement, or shared an unforgettable experience with you. Those memories become highly available in your mind. Because they are easy to remember, the brain starts treating them as evidence that the entire connection was extraordinary. The disturbing part is that less memorable experiences often disappear from awareness. Inconsistency, disappointment, neglect, or incompatibility may have occurred repeatedly, but those moments do not carry the same emotional intensity. As a result, they become harder to recall. The brain quietly edits reality, allowing a handful of vivid memories to outweigh everything else. This effect becomes even stronger after separation or distance. The mind tends to revisit emotionally charged moments over and over again. Every time those memories are replayed, they become more accessible, Eventually, they start feeling like the whole story. The creepy reality is that people often fall in love with their memories rather than the actual person. They become attached to a collection of highly available moments that dominate their thinking. The brain mistakes what is easiest to remember for what is most important. The availability heuristic reveals a disturbing truth about attraction. The people who occupy the most space in our minds are not always the ones who treated us best. Sometimes they are simply the ones who left behind the strongest memories, causing the brain to confuse emotional vividness with genuine significance. The mirror neuron effect. The mirror neuron effect is the unsettling psychological phenomenon where the human brain unconsciously reflects the emotions, behaviors, and experiences of another person. Deep inside the brain are specialized cells known as mirror neurons, which activate not only when we perform an action ourselves, but also when we observe someone else performing it. In a strange way, the brain partially experiences what it witnesses. What makes this effect so creepy is how invisible it is. Most people believe their emotions belong entirely to them. They assume their feelings arise from their own thoughts and experiences. Yet the brain is constantly absorbing signals from others, quietly recreating pieces of their emotional state inside itself. This is why emotions can spread so easily. When someone laughs sincerely, you often feel an urge to smile. When someone appears nervous, you may begin feeling tense without knowing why. When someone displays excitement, confidence, sadness, or affection, your brain starts simulating those emotions as if they were your own. In attraction, this effect becomes remarkably powerful. Spending time around someone emotionally expressive can cause you to experience echoes of their feelings. Their excitement becomes your excitement. Their happiness feels contagious. Their emotional energy slowly influences your own internal state. The disturbing part is that people often mistake these reflected emotions for evidence of a special connection. They assume they feel deeply connected because the chemistry is extraordinary. In reality, part of what they are experiencing may be their brain mirroring the emotional world of the other person. This effect becomes even stronger through prolonged exposure. The more time people spend together, the more their emotional patterns begin influencing one another. Expressions, habits, moods, and reactions start becoming synchronized. Over time, they may begin thinking, feeling, and responding in surprisingly similar ways. The eerie reality is that human beings are constantly shaping each other's emotions without speaking a word. A person's presence alone can alter how another person feels. The mirror neuron effect reveals that attraction is not always something we consciously choose. Sometimes the brain quietly starts reflecting another person, and before long, their emotions begin feeling like our own. The cognitive ease effect. The cognitive ease effect is the unsettling psychological phenomenon where people naturally feel more attracted to individuals who are easy for their minds to understand and process. The human brain constantly seeks efficiency. It prefers what feels familiar, predictable, and effortless over what feels confusing, complicated, or mentally demanding. What makes this effect so creepy is that the feeling of ease is often mistaken for something much deeper. Most people believe attraction develops because of chemistry, compatibility, or emotional connection. Yet the brain is heavily influenced by how much mental effort a person requires. Someone who is easy to talk to, easy to read, and easy to predict often feels surprisingly comforting. Their presence creates a sense of psychological smoothness that the brain finds rewarding. This is where the effect becomes powerful. When interactions flow naturally, the mind relaxes, conversations feel effortless, responses make sense, intentions seem clear. Because the brain is not forced to work hard, it interprets the experience positively. That positive feeling often becomes attached to the person themselves. The disturbing part is that people frequently mistake cognitive ease for compatibility. They assume that because someone feels comfortable, they must also be the right person for them. In reality, the attraction may be partly driven by the brain's preference for simplicity rather than genuine emotional alignment. This effect becomes even stronger when someone appears familiar. Shared interests, similar communication styles, recognizable behaviors, and predictable reactions all create cognitive ease. The mind starts feeling safe because it believes it understands what to expect. The creepy reality is that the brain can become suspicious of people who are actually healthy for us simply because they are unfamiliar. New perspectives, different backgrounds, or unusual personalities require more mental effort to understand. As a result, the mind may feel less immediate attraction even when the connection has great potential. The cognitive ease effect reveals a hidden truth about human attraction. People are often drawn toward what feels easy to process, not necessarily what is best for them. The brain rewards familiarity and predictability, quietly transforming mental comfort into emotional attraction and making simplicity feel like destiny. The emotional safety signal. The emotional safety signal is the unsettling psychological phenomenon where people become deeply drawn to those who make them feel emotionally secure. While attraction is often associated with excitement, mystery, and passion, the human brain is constantly searching for something even more powerful beneath the surface: safety. What makes this effect so fascinating is that people rarely realize how much their emotions are being shaped by it. Most individuals believe they are attracted to someone because of appearance, charm, confidence, or chemistry. Yet the brain is quietly evaluating something else. It is asking a hidden question. Is this person emotionally safe? Can I be myself around them? Will they reject me, embarrass me, or use my vulnerabilities against me? When the answer feels reassuring, something remarkable happens. The nervous system begins to relax. Defenses slowly lower. Conversations feel easier. Emotional openness becomes possible. Without consciously noticing it, people start associating those feelings of comfort and security with the person creating them. This is where the effect becomes almost eerie. A person may seem unusually attractive, not because they are the most exciting individual in the room, but because they create a sense of emotional calm that the brain desperately values. Their presence reduces anxiety, their reactions feel predictable, their acceptance feels genuine. The creepy part is that emotional safety can become incredibly addictive. Once someone experiences a person who consistently provides understanding, patience, and emotional stability, their mind begins craving that feeling. The individual becomes associated with relief from uncertainty and emotional stress. This effect becomes even stronger during moments of vulnerability. When fears, insecurities, or personal struggles are met with empathy rather than judgment, the brain treats that experience as highly significant. Trust grows rapidly because emotional safety is one of the rarest and most valuable experiences people can encounter. The disturbing reality is that many people spend years chasing excitement while unconsciously searching for safety. The emotional safety signal quietly influences attraction, attachment, and commitment, making someone feel irreplaceable not because they create the strongest emotions, but because they create the safest place for those emotions to exist. The Novelty Attraction Effect. The Novelty Attraction Effect is the strange psychological phenomenon where people become intensely drawn to what feels new, different, and unfamiliar. The human brain is naturally attracted to novelty because new experiences carry the promise of excitement, discovery, and possibility. What makes this effect so unsettling is that it can create powerful feelings of attraction that have more to do with stimulation than genuine compatibility. Most people believe they are attracted to someone because there is something uniquely special about that person. Sometimes that is true, but often part of the attraction comes from the simple fact that the person represents something new. They introduce unfamiliar experiences, unexpected perspectives, different habits, or a lifestyle that feels unlike anything encountered before. The brain finds novelty rewarding. New people create mystery. Mystery creates curiosity. Curiosity generates attention. Suddenly, the mind begins focusing intensely on someone, not because it fully understands them, but because it does not. The unknown becomes emotionally captivating. This is where the effect becomes eerie. A person may seem incredibly fascinating during the early stages of a connection. Every conversation feels exciting. Every discovery feels meaningful. The unpredictability creates anticipation. The brain releases powerful feelings of excitement because it is constantly encountering something fresh. The creepy part is that novelty can easily disguise itself as deep attraction. People often interpret the excitement of discovering someone new as evidence that they have found an extraordinary connection. In reality, part of what they are experiencing may simply be the brain's natural response to unfamiliarity. This effect becomes especially powerful because the mind tends to fill gaps in knowledge with imagination. The less someone knows about another person, the more room there is for fantasy. The unknown feels full of possibility. Flaws remain hidden. Potential appears limitless. The disturbing reality is that novelty fades. As familiarity grows, the excitement generated by uncertainty begins to decrease. Some people mistake this change for falling out of love when they are actually experiencing the natural decline of novelty. The novelty attraction effect reveals a hidden truth about attraction. Sometimes people are captivated not by who someone is, but by what they have yet to discover. The mystery itself becomes intoxicating, turning curiosity into fascination and unfamiliarity into emotional desire. The status transfer effect. The status transfer effect is the unsettling psychological phenomenon where a person's perceived value increases simply because they are associated with someone who is already admired, respected, or desired. The human mind rarely evaluates people in complete isolation. Instead, it constantly looks for social clues to determine who is important, attractive, and worthy of attention. What makes this effect so creepy is that those clues can dramatically alter attraction without changing anything about the person themselves. Most people believe they judge others based on their own experiences and observations, yet the brain is heavily influenced by association. When someone is connected to respected individuals, popular groups, or high-status environments, part of that perceived value often transfers onto them. The mind begins viewing them differently before truly getting to know them. This effect becomes especially powerful in attraction. A person who receives admiration from others can suddenly appear more attractive than they did before. Their confidence seems stronger. Their presence feels more significant. Their opinions carry more weight. Nothing about them may have changed, yet perception changes dramatically. What makes this phenomenon so eerie is that people often mistake borrowed value for genuine value. The brain assumes that if respected people choose to associate with someone, there must be a reason. That assumption creates a shortcut that influences attraction and trust. The disturbing part is that social environments can amplify this effect enormously. Being surrounded by admired friends, respected peers, or desirable individuals can create an aura that affects how someone is perceived. The association itself becomes part of their appeal. This effect can even alter emotional investment. A person may feel unusually drawn to someone because of what they represent socially, rather than who they actually are. The attraction becomes tied to perceived status, recognition, and social significance. The status transfer effect reveals a strange truth about human psychology. People are often influenced not only by a person's qualities, but by the company they keep. The mind quietly absorbs social signals, allowing admiration, desirability, and status to spread from one person to another, making someone seem more valuable simply because they stand close to those who already are. The warmth-competence balance. The warmth-competence balance is the fascinating psychological phenomenon where attraction is often strongest when a person appears both warm and competent at the same time. The human mind constantly evaluates others through two hidden questions. Are they kind, and are they capable? What makes this effect so unsettling is that people rarely realize how much these two judgments influence who they become emotionally drawn to. Most individuals assume attraction is driven by appearance, chemistry, or shared interests. Yet beneath the surface, the brain is quietly assessing warmth and competence. Warmth includes qualities such as kindness, empathy, emotional understanding, and trustworthiness. Competence includes confidence, intelligence, capability, ambition, and the ability to navigate life's challenges. This is where the effect becomes powerful. Someone who appears highly competent but lacking warmth may be respected but not deeply trusted. They can feel intimidating, distant, or emotionally unavailable. On the other hand, someone who appears warm but lacks competence may be liked yet struggle to inspire admiration or confidence. The mind is naturally drawn to people who balance both qualities. They feel safe without seeming weak. They feel capable without seeming cold. Their presence satisfies two of the brain's deepest needs at the same time: security and confidence. What makes this phenomenon so creepy is how quickly these perceptions form. Within a short interaction, the brain begins deciding whether someone feels emotionally safe and whether they seem capable of handling challenges. Those judgments can dramatically influence attraction before conscious reasoning even begins. The disturbing part is that people often become captivated by the balance itself. A person who can provide emotional comfort while also projecting strength may feel unusually magnetic. Their kindness creates trust, while their competence creates admiration. This effect becomes even stronger during moments of vulnerability. When someone responds with understanding while remaining calm, confident, and reliable, the brain treats them as exceptionally valuable. They appear capable of providing both emotional connection and stability. The warmth-competence balance reveals a hidden truth about attraction. People are often drawn to those who make them feel protected without feeling controlled, understood without feeling judged, and supported without feeling dependent. The combination creates a powerful psychological pull that can make someone seem remarkably difficult to forget. The trust calibration effect. The trust calibration effect is the unsettling psychological phenomenon where attraction and emotional attachment grow according to how accurately trust is built over time. The human mind is constantly measuring whether another person's words, actions, intentions, and behaviors align with one another. What makes this effect so fascinating is that trust is rarely given all at once. Instead, the brain gradually adjusts its level of trust based on repeated experiences, quietly deciding who deserves access to our emotions. Most people believe trust is a conscious choice. They assume they simply decide whether someone is trustworthy or not. In reality, the brain is continuously recalibrating its judgment. Every promise kept, every action matched to words, and every moment of consistency adds evidence. Every contradiction, disappointment, or broken expectation subtracts from it. This is where the effect becomes powerful. Attraction often intensifies when trust develops at a steady pace. Each positive experience reinforces the belief that someone is safe to invest in emotionally. The mind begins lowering its defenses because the other person's behavior repeatedly confirms what they claim to be. What makes this effect so creepy is that trust can feel almost invisible while it is being built. A person may suddenly realize they care deeply about someone without knowing exactly when that happened. The attachment did not appear overnight. It grew through hundreds of small moments where the brain quietly gathered evidence and adjusted its calculations. The disturbing part is that people often mistake trust for chemistry. They feel unusually comfortable around someone and assume it is destiny or a special connection. In reality, their brain may simply be responding to a consistent pattern of reliability and emotional safety. This effect becomes especially intense because trust creates vulnerability. The more accurately someone meets expectations, the more emotional access they receive. Eventually, their approval matters more. Their absence feels heavier. Their actions carry greater emotional consequences. The trust calibration effect reveals a hidden truth about attraction. Emotional attachment often grows not through grand gestures, but through countless small moments of consistency. The mind is constantly measuring who deserves trust, and once someone repeatedly passes those invisible tests, they can become deeply significant long before either person fully understands why. The flirtation ambiguity effect. The flirtation ambiguity effect is the unsettling psychological phenomenon where attraction intensifies when a person's romantic interest remains unclear. The human mind is naturally drawn to certainty, yet when it comes to attraction, uncertainty can become strangely captivating. A person who openly expresses their feelings may create comfort, but a person whose intentions remain ambiguous can create fascination. What makes this effect so creepy is how powerfully it occupies the mind. When someone's interest is obvious, there is little left to analyze. The brain receives the answer and can move forward. But when signals are mixed, subtle, or difficult to interpret, the mind becomes trapped in a cycle of investigation. Every interaction suddenly feels significant. A smile lasts longer than expected. A compliment seems loaded with meaning. Eye contact becomes something to dissect for hours afterward. The brain starts searching for hidden clues, trying to determine whether the attraction is real or imagined. This is where the effect becomes dangerous. Ambiguity creates a psychological puzzle, and the human brain hates unfinished puzzles. The uncertainty keeps the person mentally present because the mind believes the answer is just one interaction away. Every new encounter becomes an opportunity to finally solve the mystery. The disturbing part is that people often mistake this constant mental engagement for deep attraction. They assume they are thinking about someone because the connection is extraordinary. In reality, part of their obsession may be driven by the unanswered question itself. This effect becomes even stronger when occasional signs of interest appear. A flirtatious comment, a lingering glance, or an unexpected moment of attention provides just enough evidence to keep hope alive. The brain receives a small reward, but never enough certainty to stop searching. The eerie reality is that ambiguity can sometimes create stronger emotional investment than clear affection. The mind becomes addicted to possibility. It continuously imagines outcomes, analyzes behaviors, and anticipates future interactions. The flirtation ambiguity effect reveals a strange truth about attraction. Sometimes people become captivated not by what they know, but by what they cannot figure out. The mystery itself becomes emotionally rewarding, turning uncertainty into fascination and unanswered questions into powerful emotional attachment. The projection bias. The projection bias is the unsettling psychological phenomenon where people unknowingly assume that another person thinks, feels, desires, or values the same things they do. Instead of seeing someone as they truly are, the mind quietly fills in the blanks with pieces of itself. What makes this effect so creepy is that it can create a powerful sense of connection that exists largely inside one person's imagination. Most people believe they understand others through observation and experience. Yet the brain often takes a shortcut. When information is missing, it naturally uses its own feelings as a reference point. If you would respond a certain way in a situation, you unconsciously assume the other person would too. If something feels meaningful to you, you assume it must feel meaningful to them as well. This is where the effect becomes dangerous. A person may believe they have found someone who deeply understands them, shares their values, and sees the world in a similar way. In reality, much of that perceived similarity may be based on assumptions rather than evidence. The mind begins projecting its own hopes, fears, intentions, and desires onto the other person. What makes this phenomenon so eerie is how convincing it feels. The connection appears genuine because the projected qualities feel familiar. The person seems perfect because they are being viewed through the lens of your own preferences. Instead of discovering who they actually are, the brain quietly transforms them into a reflection of what it wants to see. The disturbing part is that projection often survives despite contradictory evidence. Warning signs may be ignored. Differences may be minimized. The mind becomes invested in the version of the person it has created, making reality harder to accept. This effect becomes especially powerful during the early stages of attraction when information is limited. The fewer facts the brain has, the more room there is for projection. Imagination begins filling every gap. The projection bias reveals a strange truth about attraction. Sometimes people do not fall for another person. They fall for their own assumptions about that person. The mind paints its desires onto someone else's blank spaces, creating a connection that feels incredibly real even when much of it exists only within the imagination. The expectancy effect. The expectancy effect is the unsettling psychological phenomenon where people's beliefs about someone can quietly influence how they perceive them, interact with them, and even how that person behaves in return. The human mind is constantly creating expectations, and once those expectations are formed, they often begin shaping reality in surprising ways. What makes this effect so creepy is that attraction can sometimes grow from what people expect to find rather than what is actually there. If someone believes a person is charming, interesting, or emotionally special, they tend to notice behaviors that support those beliefs while overlooking information that contradicts them. The expectation becomes a filter through which every interaction is viewed. This process usually happens without conscious awareness. A person may hear positive things about someone before meeting them, see them in a certain light from the beginning, or simply develop an early impression that feels compelling. Once that expectation takes hold, the brain starts searching for evidence that confirms it. The disturbing part is that expectations do not only affect perception, they also affect behavior. If you expect someone to be warm and engaging, you often become warmer and more engaging toward them. In response, they may naturally act friendlier. The expectation begins creating the very behavior it anticipated. This is where the effect becomes powerful. Attraction can deepen because people start responding to their expectations rather than the person themselves. The connection feels real because the interactions are real, yet those interactions are being subtly shaped by beliefs formed long before the relationship fully developed. The creepy reality is that someone can become emotionally important, partly because of a story the mind created about them. The expectation becomes the foundation upon which attraction grows. Every positive interaction strengthens the narrative, making it feel increasingly accurate. This effect becomes especially intense during the early stages of attraction, when information is limited and imagination is abundant. The brain fills in missing details, creates assumptions, and begins treating those assumptions as reality. The expectancy effect reveals a hidden truth about human connection. People are often influenced not only by who someone is, but by who they expect them to be. Sometimes the mind writes the script first, and then spends months searching for evidence that the story was true all along. The like-likes-like effect. The like-likes-like effect is the unsettling psychological phenomenon where people often become more attracted to someone when they believe that person is attracted to them. At first glance, this seems obvious. Most people enjoy being appreciated. What makes this effect so fascinating, however, is how dramatically the perception of being liked can alter attraction itself. Many individuals assume attraction happens first and then leads to mutual interest. Yet the human mind often works in reverse. The moment someone suspects they are desired, admired, or appreciated, that person can suddenly appear more attractive than before. A feeling that barely existed can begin growing simply because it appears to be returned. What makes this effect so creepy is how quickly it can change perception. Imagine someone who initially seems ordinary. Then you discover they find you interesting. Suddenly, you begin noticing qualities you overlooked before. Their jokes become funnier. Their attention feels more meaningful. Their presence starts carrying emotional weight. The reason this happens lies deep within human psychology. Being liked feels validating. It satisfies the desire for acceptance and reduces the fear of rejection. The brain interprets another person's interest as evidence that they possess value. If someone chooses us, there must be a reason. That assumption quietly increases their perceived attractiveness. This is where the effect becomes powerful. Attraction begins feeding itself. The more someone believes they are liked, the more positively they respond. The more positively they respond, the stronger the connection becomes. A simple perception can trigger an emotional cycle that steadily intensifies. The disturbing part is that people often mistake this validation for compatibility. They believe they are developing feelings because the connection is special. In reality, part of their attraction may be coming from the rewarding experience of feeling wanted. This effect becomes even stronger when interest is revealed gradually. Small signs of admiration, subtle compliments, and indications of affection create emotional momentum. The mind starts paying closer attention, searching for additional evidence of interest. The like-likes-like effect reveals a strange truth about attraction. Sometimes people become drawn to someone not because of who that person is, but because of how that person makes them feel about themselves. The knowledge that someone wants us can quietly transform curiosity into attraction and attention into emotional attachment. The negativity bias. The negativity bias is the unsettling psychological phenomenon where negative experiences, comments, and emotions carry far more weight in the mind than positive ones. The human brain is naturally designed to pay closer attention to potential threats than rewards. While this helped our ancestors survive danger, it also creates a strange effect in attraction and relationships. One negative moment can sometimes overshadow dozens of positive ones. What makes this effect so creepy is how deeply it influences memory and emotion. A person may receive countless signs of affection, support, and appreciation, yet find themselves obsessing over a single criticism, rejection, or disappointing interaction. The mind treats negative experiences as especially important, storing them with unusual clarity. This is where the effect becomes powerful. Imagine someone who is generally kind and attentive but occasionally becomes distant or cold. Instead of focusing on the many positive interactions, the brain often becomes fixated on the negative ones. The uncertainty created by those moments can dominate thoughts and emotions. The disturbing part is that negativity often feels more significant than it actually is. A brief rejection can feel more emotionally impactful than weeks of acceptance. One painful conversation can seem more memorable than countless pleasant ones. The brain naturally prioritizes information that appears threatening because it believes that information is essential for future survival. In attraction, this can create a strange emotional trap. A person may become preoccupied with someone who hurt, rejected, or disappointed them, not because the connection was necessarily stronger, but because the negative experience created a powerful emotional imprint. The mind keeps revisiting the memory, searching for answers, explanations, or ways to prevent similar pain in the future. The creepy reality is that people often mistake emotional intensity for emotional importance. Because negative experiences generate stronger reactions, they feel more meaningful. The person associated with those experiences begins occupying more mental space. The negativity bias reveals a disturbing truth about human psychology. The people who affect us most are not always the ones who gave us the greatest happiness. Sometimes they are the ones who created the strongest emotional wounds. The brain clings to those painful moments, turning them into lasting memories that can influence attraction, attachment, and decision-making long after the experience itself has ended. The Positivity Resonance Effect. The positivity resonance effect is the fascinating psychological phenomenon where attraction grows through the repeated sharing of positive emotional experiences. It occurs when two people become emotionally synchronized in moments of genuine warmth, joy, excitement, appreciation, or affection. What makes this effect so powerful is that it goes far beyond simply feeling good. It creates a sense of emotional connection that the brain begins associating with a specific person. Most people believe attraction develops because of dramatic moments, physical appearance, or intense chemistry, yet some of the strongest emotional bonds are built through something much quieter: a shared laugh, a meaningful glance, a moment of mutual understanding, a conversation that leaves both people feeling energized and understood. These small, positive interactions accumulate over time. What makes this effect so eerie is how invisible it can be while it is happening. No single interaction seems life-changing, yet with every shared positive experience, the brain strengthens its association between that feeling and the person who helped create it. Gradually, their presence begins triggering anticipation of those emotions. The mind naturally seeks experiences that feel rewarding. When someone consistently becomes a source of positive emotional states, their value increases dramatically. They begin feeling comforting, uplifting, and emotionally significant. Without realizing it, a person may start looking forward to seeing them, hearing from them, or simply being around them. The creepy part is that people often underestimate how deeply these moments shape attraction. They search for grand explanations while overlooking the countless positive interactions quietly building emotional attachment beneath the surface. This effect becomes especially powerful because positive emotions are contagious. Shared laughter creates more laughter. Shared excitement creates more excitement. Each emotional exchange strengthens the feeling of connection and mutual understanding. The positivity resonance effect reveals a hidden truth about attraction. Emotional bonds are often built through repeated moments of shared positivity rather than dramatic gestures. The brain begins linking a person to feelings of happiness, warmth, and emotional reward. Over time, those feelings can become so strongly associated with them that their presence alone is enough to brighten a person's emotional world, making them feel increasingly difficult to replace. The emotional validation effect. The emotional validation effect is the unsettling psychological phenomenon where people become deeply attached to those who make them feel understood. More than compliments, attention, or attraction, one of the strongest human desires is the need to have emotions acknowledged and accepted. When someone truly understands what we feel without dismissing, correcting, or judging us, the brain often interprets that experience as extraordinarily valuable. What makes this effect so creepy is how quickly it can create emotional closeness. A person may spend years feeling misunderstood by friends, family, or previous partners. Then someone enters their life and responds differently. Instead of arguing with their feelings, they recognize them. Instead of minimizing their pain, they acknowledge it. Suddenly, a powerful psychological bond begins forming. The human mind is constantly searching for emotional safety. When someone validates an emotion, they send a hidden message. Your feelings make sense. That message can feel incredibly relieving because it removes the fear of being rejected for what is happening inside. This is where the effect becomes powerful. The validated person starts associating feelings of relief, comfort, and acceptance with the individual providing them. Their presence becomes emotionally rewarding. Conversations feel deeper. Trust develops faster. The connection begins feeling unusually meaningful. The disturbing part is that emotional validation can sometimes create attachment before genuine compatibility has been established. A person may become intensely drawn to someone simply because that individual makes them feel seen. The experience is so rare and emotionally satisfying that it can overshadow other important considerations. This effect becomes even stronger during moments of vulnerability. Sharing fears, insecurities, disappointments, or personal struggles creates emotional risk. When those disclosures are met with understanding rather than judgment, the brain treats the interaction as highly significant. The emotional validation effect reveals a hidden truth about attraction. People are often drawn not to those who solve their problems, but to those who make their emotions feel real. Being understood satisfies a deep psychological need, and once someone consistently provides that feeling, they can become emotionally important far more quickly than either person expects. The mind begins associating them with acceptance itself, creating a bond that feels profoundly difficult to ignore. The self-disclosure effect. The self-disclosure effect is the unsettling psychological phenomenon where attraction and emotional attachment grow when people reveal personal information about themselves. The more meaningful the disclosure, the stronger the potential bond becomes. What makes this effect so fascinating is that sharing private thoughts, fears, dreams, insecurities, and life experiences can create feelings of closeness far faster than most people realize. Most individuals believe connection develops through time alone, yet the human mind places enormous value on access. When someone reveals parts of themselves that are normally hidden from others, the brain interprets that openness as a sign of trust. The disclosure feels special because it creates the impression that you are being allowed into a private world. This is where the effect becomes powerful. A conversation that begins casually can suddenly feel deeply significant when someone shares a personal story, a painful memory, or a secret they rarely discuss. The emotional depth changes the atmosphere. The interaction feels more intimate, more meaningful, and more memorable. What makes this phenomenon so creepy is that emotional closeness can form long before true familiarity exists. Two people may know relatively little about each other's daily lives, habits, values, or long-term compatibility. Yet after exchanging deeply personal information, they may feel an unusually strong connection. The vulnerability creates an illusion of profound understanding. The human brain naturally rewards disclosure because it signals trust and acceptance. When someone shares something personal and receives a positive response, both individuals often feel closer. This encourages even more disclosure, creating a cycle that steadily deepens emotional investment. The disturbing part is that people often mistake emotional intimacy for complete intimacy. They assume that because someone knows their secrets, they truly know them. In reality, personal disclosure is only one piece of genuine connection. This effect becomes especially intense because secrets create exclusivity. Knowing something that few others know generates a feeling of significance. The person becomes emotionally important because they have access to parts of us that remain hidden from the rest of the world. The self-disclosure effect reveals a strange truth about attraction. People are often drawn to those who know their inner stories. The act of sharing personal truths creates a powerful psychological bridge, making someone feel remarkably close even when much of the relationship remains unexplored. The complement specificity effect. The complement specificity effect is the unsettling psychological phenomenon where highly specific compliments create a much stronger emotional impact than general praise. Most people have heard generic compliments countless times. They are nice, but they often fade quickly. A specific compliment, however, can remain in someone's mind for years. What makes this effect so powerful is that it creates the feeling of being truly noticed. The human mind has a deep desire to feel seen, not simply admired, but understood. When someone gives a vague compliment, the brain often treats it as routine. But when they point out a particular detail, habit, trait, or quality, something different happens. The compliment feels personal, it feels intentional, it feels real. This is where the effect becomes strangely powerful. Instead of saying someone is attractive, a person notices the way they smile when talking about something they love. Instead of calling someone intelligent, they recognize how thoughtfully they explain complicated ideas. The specificity signals genuine attention. What makes this phenomenon so creepy is that the brain often interprets detailed observation as emotional significance. If someone notices things that others overlook, they begin feeling different from everyone else. Their words carry more weight because they appear to be seeing parts of you that remain invisible to most people. The disturbing part is that specific compliments can create emotional attachment far faster than people realize. A carefully chosen observation can linger in the mind long after the conversation ends. The recipient may replay the compliment repeatedly, not because of the praise itself, but because it satisfied a deeper need to be recognized. This effect becomes even stronger when the compliment focuses on qualities that are rarely acknowledged. Hidden strengths, personal struggles, unique habits, or overlooked characteristics often create the strongest emotional reactions because they touch parts of identity that feel deeply personal. The compliment specificity effect reveals a fascinating truth about attraction. People are often drawn to those who make them feel visible. A specific compliment tells the brain that someone is paying close attention, and that attention can feel surprisingly intimate. Sometimes a single well-placed observation creates a stronger emotional impact than 100 generic compliments ever could. The psychological reactance effect. The psychological reactance effect is the unsettling psychological phenomenon where people often want something more the moment they feel their freedom to choose it is being restricted. The human mind has a deep need for autonomy. When that freedom feels threatened, an unexpected reaction occurs. Desire frequently intensifies instead of disappearing. What makes this effect so creepy is how quickly attraction can increase once access becomes limited. Most people assume that if someone becomes unavailable, distant, or difficult to obtain, their feelings should naturally fade. Yet the brain often responds in the opposite way. The restriction itself can make the person seem more valuable. The moment someone feels they are losing a choice, the mind becomes obsessed with reclaiming it. A person who was once taken for granted can suddenly dominate thoughts simply because they seem less available than before. The loss of access creates urgency, and urgency creates emotional intensity. This is where the effect becomes dangerous. Attraction starts becoming tied to freedom rather than compatibility. The brain shifts its focus away from whether the connection is healthy and toward the challenge of regaining what appears to be slipping away. The restriction becomes part of the desire. What makes this phenomenon particularly eerie is that people often mistake reactance for love. They believe their feelings are growing stronger because the connection is special. In reality, part of the emotional surge may be coming from the psychological discomfort of losing control over the situation. The effect becomes even stronger when someone is told they should not pursue a particular person or when external barriers stand in the way. Suddenly, the connection feels more important than it did before. The obstacle creates value. The limitation creates fascination. The disturbing part is that the mind can become more focused on obtaining someone than understanding them. The pursuit itself becomes emotionally rewarding. Every obstacle increases the perceived significance of the relationship. The psychological reactance effect reveals a hidden truth about attraction. People are often influenced by what they feel they cannot freely have. The moment choice is threatened, desire can intensify, transforming ordinary interest into obsession. Sometimes the strongest feelings are not created by the person themselves, but by the fear that the opportunity to choose them may disappear forever. The loss aversion effect. The loss aversion effect is the unsettling psychological phenomenon where the fear of losing someone often feels far more powerful than the happiness of having them. The human brain is wired to treat losses as emotionally heavier than gains. In simple terms, losing something valuable hurts more than gaining something equally valuable feels good. What makes this effect so creepy is how strongly it can influence attraction, attachment, and emotional decision-making without people realizing it. Most individuals believe they stay emotionally invested because of love, compatibility, or connection. Yet sometimes the strongest force keeping someone attached is not the joy of the relationship, but the fear of what life would feel like without it. The possibility of loss suddenly becomes more emotionally significant than the reality of the relationship itself. This is where the effect becomes powerful. A person may take someone for granted when they feel secure in the connection. But the moment they sense distance, withdrawal, or the possibility of losing that person, their emotions often intensify dramatically. Suddenly, every interaction matters more. Every message becomes important. The relationship feels more valuable than it did before. What makes this phenomenon so eerie is that the perceived value of a person can increase simply because they might disappear. The threat of loss forces the brain to focus on everything it stands to lose. Positive memories become more vivid. Good qualities become more noticeable. Flaws begin fading into the background. The disturbing part is that people frequently mistake this fear-driven attachment for deeper love. They assume their emotions have grown stronger because the connection is extraordinary. In reality, part of what they are experiencing may be the brain's instinctive resistance to loss. This effect becomes even stronger because uncertainty amplifies fear. The less certain someone feels about keeping a connection, the more attention the brain dedicates to protecting it. Emotional investment increases as the possibility of losing it becomes more real. The loss aversion effect reveals a strange truth about human attraction. People often realize the value of someone most intensely when they fear that person may no longer be available. The mind becomes consumed by what could be lost, transforming ordinary attachment into powerful emotional urgency and making someone seem irreplaceable simply because their absence suddenly feels possible. The intimacy gradient. The intimacy gradient is the unsettling psychological phenomenon where emotional attachment grows through a gradual increase in closeness rather than through a single dramatic moment. The human mind rarely jumps from stranger to deep connection overnight. Instead, attraction often develops through a series of small emotional steps, each one lowering defenses and increasing trust. What makes this effect so creepy is that people often do not notice how attached they have become until they are already deeply invested. Most individuals assume they will recognize the exact moment they start caring about someone, yet the brain typically works much more quietly. One conversation leads to another. Personal details are exchanged. Private thoughts are shared. Emotional access slowly increases. The connection deepens so gradually that the attachment feels almost invisible while it is forming. This is where the effect becomes powerful. Every step of intimacy creates a foundation for the next one. A casual conversation becomes a meaningful discussion. A meaningful discussion becomes emotional openness. Emotional openness becomes trust. Trust becomes dependence. The process feels natural because each stage appears only slightly deeper than the one before it. What makes this phenomenon so eerie is that the mind adapts to every new level of closeness. What once felt deeply personal eventually becomes normal. As a result, people continue moving further into emotional intimacy without realizing how much access they have granted another person. The disturbing part is that attachment often grows before conscious awareness catches up. A person may suddenly realize they care intensely about someone and struggle to understand why. The answer is usually hidden within countless small moments that seemed insignificant at the time. This effect becomes even stronger because intimacy creates emotional momentum. The more someone shares, the more connected they feel. The more connected they feel, the easier it becomes to share even more. The cycle continues, steadily increasing emotional investment. The intimacy gradient reveals a fascinating truth about attraction. Powerful bonds are often built through tiny emotional steps rather than grand romantic events. The mind slowly lowers its barriers, one interaction at a time, until a person who once felt like a stranger becomes someone whose presence feels essential. By the time the attachment is recognized, the journey toward intimacy has often been unfolding for far longer than anyone realized. The rejection sensitivity pattern. The rejection sensitivity pattern is the unsettling psychological phenomenon where a person becomes hyper-aware of any sign of disapproval, distance, or emotional withdrawal in others. The human mind is deeply wired to detect rejection because, on a survival level, social exclusion once meant danger. What makes this effect so powerful is that it can distort perception in relationships, turning small signals into emotionally overwhelming experiences. Most people believe they respond logically to social cues, yet in reality, the brain constantly scans for signs that someone might lose interest, pull away, or become emotionally unavailable. A delayed message, a shorter reply, A change in tone or a moment of silence can suddenly feel significant even when nothing meaningful has actually changed. This is where the effect becomes intense. The mind begins filling in gaps with assumptions. Did I say something wrong? Are they losing interest? Did I do something to change how they feel? These thoughts appear automatically, often without evidence, creating emotional tension that feels very real. What makes this phenomenon so creepy is how quickly it can alter emotional states. A person can go from feeling secure and connected to anxious and uncertain based on something as small as a brief interaction shift. The emotional reaction is often far larger than the actual situation warrants. The disturbing part is that rejection sensitivity can influence behavior in ways that unintentionally strain relationships. Overthinking can lead to reassurance seeking, emotional withdrawal, or overcompensation, which may change how the other person responds. This creates a feedback loop where fear of rejection can slowly shape the very outcome it is trying to avoid. This effect becomes even stronger in early stages of attraction, where uncertainty is naturally higher. The brain becomes highly alert to any possible sign of disinterest, constantly scanning for meaning in subtle behaviors that may not actually carry emotional intent. The rejection sensitivity pattern reveals a hidden truth about human connection. People are often not only reacting to what others do, but also to what they fear those actions might mean. The mind can turn ambiguity into emotional intensity, making even small shifts in attention feel like powerful signals of acceptance or rejection, long before reality has truly changed. The secure base effect. The secure base effect is the unsettling psychological phenomenon where a person becomes a foundation for emotional stability, allowing someone else to explore life with greater confidence, risk-taking, and openness. In simple terms, the brain begins to treat one individual as a safe place, a mental and emotional anchor that reduces anxiety and increases willingness to engage with the world. Most people assume attraction is driven by excitement, chemistry, or shared interests, yet beneath those surface-level experiences, the mind is constantly searching for emotional stability. When someone consistently provides calmness, reassurance, and predictable support, they begin to represent safety in an unpredictable world. That sense of safety can quietly evolve into deep attachment. What makes this effect so creepy is how subtly it forms. There is rarely a single defining moment where someone becomes a secure base. Instead, it develops through repeated experiences of comfort, a calming response during stress, a steady presence during uncertainty, a consistent emotional tone when everything else feels unstable. Over time, the brain begins to associate that person with relief from internal tension. The disturbing part is that emotional dependence can grow without conscious awareness. A person may feel unusually unsettled when that individual is absent, not because anything dramatic is happening, but because their nervous system has learned to regulate itself around that presence. Their emotional world becomes calibrated to another person. This effect becomes even stronger in moments of vulnerability. During stress, confusion, or emotional overwhelm, the brain is more likely to lock onto whatever provides stability. When someone consistently offers understanding and reassurance, they become mentally positioned as a safe reference point. What makes this phenomenon particularly eerie is that attachment can form not through excitement, but through relief. The absence of anxiety becomes associated with the person who provides it. Over time, calmness itself becomes emotionally rewarding. The secure base effect reveals a hidden truth about attraction. Sometimes people are not only drawn to those who excite them, but also to those who stabilize them. The mind quietly bonds to whoever makes life feel safer, turning emotional grounding into attachment and consistency into a powerful form of connection that can feel surprisingly difficult to replace. The anxious pursuit pattern. The anxious pursuit pattern is the unsettling psychological phenomenon where uncertainty in a connection triggers an intense drive to chase, seek reassurance, and regain emotional control. Instead of pulling away when things feel unclear, the human mind can become more focused, more alert, and more emotionally invested. What makes this effect so powerful is that it often feels like love, when in reality, it is frequently driven by anxiety. Most people believe attraction is calm, steady, and mutual, yet the brain reacts strongly to unpredictability. When someone becomes less responsive, less predictable, or emotionally inconsistent, the mind interprets it as a potential loss. That perception activates a deep psychological response, the urge to restore closeness. This is where the effect becomes intense. A person may find themselves checking messages repeatedly, replaying conversations, analyzing tone, and searching for hidden meaning in small changes. Silence becomes loud. Delays feel significant. Every small shift in attention becomes emotionally charged. What makes this phenomenon so creepy is how it distorts perception of value. The less available someone becomes, the more mentally important they can appear. The brain confuses emotional discomfort with emotional significance. The pursuit becomes a way of relieving internal tension rather than building genuine connection. The disturbing part is that this pattern can quietly take over decision-making. Instead of asking whether the connection is healthy or fulfilling, the mind focuses on regaining contact, clarity, or reassurance. Emotional energy shifts toward chasing rather than evaluating. This effect becomes even stronger when occasional attention is given. A message after silence, a brief moment of warmth, or a sudden sign of interest can reset the emotional cycle, reinforcing hope and restarting pursuit. The inconsistency keeps the mind engaged, always expecting the next shift. The anxious pursuit pattern reveals a hidden truth about attraction. Sometimes people are not chasing love itself, but the relief that comes when uncertainty temporarily disappears. The mind can become attached to the cycle of worry and reassurance, turning emotional instability into fixation and making inconsistency feel strangely powerful. The avoidant withdrawal pattern. The avoidant withdrawal pattern is the unsettling psychological phenomenon where a person instinctively pulls away when emotional closeness begins to feel too intense. Instead of leaning into connection, the mind associates intimacy with pressure, loss of independence, or emotional risk. What makes this effect so powerful is that the withdrawal often happens automatically, even when there is genuine interest present. Most people assume attraction naturally leads to closeness. Yet for some individuals, the brain reacts differently when emotional proximity increases. At first, things feel comfortable, even exciting. But as vulnerability grows, the nervous system begins to interpret closeness as something overwhelming. Emotional distance suddenly feels safer than emotional exposure. This is where the effect becomes unsettling. A person may enjoy attention, affection, and connection in small doses, but begin to feel uneasy when those feelings deepen. Messages may take longer to reply to. Conversations may become shorter. Emotional openness may quietly decrease without clear explanation. What makes this phenomenon so creepy is how confusing it can be for the other person. From the outside, the withdrawal can appear random or inconsistent. One moment there is warmth and engagement, and the next there is distance. The emotional shift is not always intentional, which makes it even harder to understand. The disturbing part is that withdrawal is often not a rejection of the other person, but a reaction to internal discomfort. The closeness itself triggers a protective response. The mind attempts to restore emotional balance by creating space, even if that space creates confusion or disconnection. This effect becomes even stronger when intimacy develops quickly. Rapid emotional closeness can overwhelm the system, causing the brain to prioritize autonomy over attachment. The result is a cycle where connection builds, then recedes, then builds again. The avoidant withdrawal pattern reveals a hidden truth about attraction. Not all distance means lack of feeling. Sometimes the mind retreats from what it values most simply because closeness itself feels emotionally intense. The push away is not always about the person being rejected, but about the internal struggle to manage vulnerability and maintain a sense of control. The pursuer-distancer dynamic. The pursuer-distancer dynamic is the unsettling psychological phenomenon where one person moves closer emotionally while the other instinctively pulls away. This creates a repeating cycle of chase and retreat that can quietly define many relationships without either person fully realizing what is happening. What makes this effect so powerful is that both sides often believe they are reacting reasonably while actually reinforcing each other's behavior. Most people assume relationship tension comes from incompatibility or lack of interest. Yet often, attraction and fear are operating at the same time. The pursuer becomes more emotionally activated when they feel distance. They seek reassurance, clarity, and connection. The distancer, however, becomes more overwhelmed as emotional intensity increases, leading them to withdraw in order to regain a sense of control. This is where the effect becomes unsettling. The more one person chases emotional closeness, the more the other person may retreat. And the more the other retreats, the more the first person feels compelled to pursue. The relationship begins to feel like a psychological loop that feeds itself. What makes this phenomenon so creepy is how easily it can feel like passion. The highs and lows, the tension and relief, the moments of closeness followed by distance can create an intense emotional experience. The brain may interpret this instability as depth, even when it is actually a cycle of misaligned emotional regulation. The disturbing part is that both roles are often unconscious. The pursuer may not realize their urgency is driven by anxiety and fear of loss. The distancer may not realize their withdrawal is driven by emotional overwhelm rather than lack of care. Both are responding to internal patterns rather than the actual state of the relationship. This effect becomes even stronger because each side reinforces the other. Pursuit confirms the distancer's need for space. Distance confirms the pursuer's fear of abandonment. Over time, the dynamic can intensify, making emotional balance difficult to achieve. The pursuer-distancer dynamic reveals a hidden truth about attraction. Sometimes what feels like strong chemistry is actually a cycle of opposing emotional needs. The connection does not fail because there is no feeling, but because closeness itself becomes a trigger for opposite responses, turning attraction into a repeating push and pull that feels impossible to fully resolve. The demand-withdraw pattern. The demand-withdraw pattern is the unsettling psychological phenomenon where one person in a connection seeks answers, emotional engagement, or resolution, while the other responds by pulling away, shutting down, or avoiding the conversation entirely. What makes this effect so powerful is that it often appears in situations where both people care, yet still struggle to connect in a stable way. Most people assume relationship conflict is simply about disagreement. But in this pattern, the issue is not only what is being discussed, but how each person responds to emotional tension. One person becomes more insistent when they feel uncertainty or distance. They ask more questions, push for clarity, and try to resolve emotional discomfort through communication. The other person, however, experiences that same intensity as pressure and responds by withdrawing to regain calm. This is where the effect becomes unsettling. The more one person pushes for closeness or answers, the more the other may retreat to avoid feeling overwhelmed. And the more they retreat, the more the first person intensifies their effort to reconnect. The interaction becomes a cycle where both sides are reacting to each other's coping mechanisms rather than the actual issue at hand. What makes this phenomenon so creepy is how quickly it can distort emotional perception. The demand side may feel ignored, dismissed, or emotionally rejected. The withdraw side may feel attacked, overwhelmed, or misunderstood. Both experience the situation as emotionally justified, even though they are contributing to the same loop. The disturbing part is that this pattern can slowly reshape attraction itself. Emotional frustration can begin replacing calm connection. Moments of communication may feel intense rather than peaceful. The relationship starts to feel like something that requires constant repair instead of natural flow. This effect becomes even stronger when neither person recognizes their role in the cycle. Without awareness, the demand increases emotional pressure while withdrawal increases emotional distance. Each response unintentionally confirms the other's behavior, creating a self-reinforcing loop. The demand-withdraw pattern reveals a hidden truth about attraction. Sometimes emotional distance is not caused by lack of care, but by mismatched ways of handling stress and vulnerability. The result is a cycle where one person reaches for connection while the other retreats from it, turning communication into a repeating tension that feels increasingly difficult to break. The emotional bids theory. The emotional bids theory is the unsettling psychological phenomenon where attraction and relationship stability are shaped by small, often unnoticed attempts to gain emotional connection. These bids can be as simple as a comment, a question, a glance, a joke, or a subtle attempt to share attention. What makes this effect so powerful is that the success or failure of these tiny moments quietly determines how close or distant two people become over time. Most people believe relationships are built through major events or important conversations, yet in reality, the human brain is constantly making emotional offers and testing for responses. When someone says something lighthearted, seeks attention, or tries to share an experience, they are often making a small emotional bid for connection without even realizing it. This is where the effect becomes unsettling. Each bid carries a silent question. Are you with me, or are you not? When the other person responds positively, even in a small way, the connection strengthens. A smile, a laugh, a reply, or simple acknowledgement signals emotional presence. But when these bids are ignored or dismissed, even subtly, the emotional distance quietly grows. What makes this phenomenon so creepy is how invisible it is while it is happening. No single ignored bid usually feels significant, but over time, patterns form. A person may begin feeling emotionally unseen, not because of one major rejection, but because of repeated small moments where their attempts at connection were not fully received. The disturbing part is that attraction can be shaped by how consistently these bids are met. Someone who regularly responds with attention, engagement, and emotional presence begins to feel increasingly important. Their responsiveness creates a sense of safety and emotional reward. This effect becomes even stronger because emotional bids are often subtle. People rarely announce them. They are hidden inside everyday interactions, making their impact difficult to recognize in real time. The emotional bids theory reveals a hidden truth about attraction. Relationships are often shaped not by grand gestures, but by countless small moments of attention or absence. The mind quietly records these interactions, building emotional closeness when bids are accepted and emotional distance when they are missed, slowly determining how deeply two people become connected without either fully realizing it. The repair attempt effect. The repair attempt effect is the unsettling psychological phenomenon where small efforts to restore emotional connection during tension can determine whether a relationship survives or slowly breaks down. A repair attempt is any gesture, word, joke, apology, or shift in tone that tries to reduce conflict or emotional distance in the middle of discomfort. What makes this effect so powerful is that these tiny moments often matter more than the conflict itself. Most people believe relationships are shaped by big arguments or major events, yet the human brain is constantly tracking something more subtle, whether emotional disconnection is being repaired or ignored. During tension, the nervous system becomes sensitive, scanning for signals that safety can be restored. This is where the effect becomes unsettling. In moments of conflict, one person may try to soften the situation with humor, a gentle comment, an apology, or a change in tone. These are repair attempts. If the other person recognizes and accepts them, even slightly, emotional tension can decrease quickly. The connection begins to recover in real time. But when repair attempts are missed or rejected, the emotional gap deepens, not because of the original issue, but because the opportunity to reconnect was not taken. The mind begins to interpret this as emotional rejection rather than simple disagreement. What makes this phenomenon so creepy is how quietly it shapes attraction. A person who consistently responds to repair attempts can feel emotionally safe, even during conflict. Their presence signals that tension does not lead to abandonment. Over time, this creates trust at a deeper level than agreement ever could. The disturbing part is that many relationships do not break only because of conflict, but because repair attempts fail repeatedly. Small moments that could have restored closeness are overlooked, dismissed, or misunderstood. The emotional distance slowly accumulates without dramatic events. This effect becomes even stronger because repair attempts are often subtle. A shift in tone, a softening of expression, or a small gesture can carry more meaning than the words themselves. The repair attempt effect reveals a hidden truth about attraction. It is not the absence of conflict that builds connection, but the ability to return from it. The mind quietly measures whether emotional distance can be repaired, and when it cannot, even small moments of tension begin to feel like signs of deeper separation. The microaction effect. The microaction effect is the unsettling psychological phenomenon where extremely small, almost invisible gestures of warmth can create disproportionately strong emotional attachment. These are not grand romantic actions or dramatic displays of love, but subtle moments like a softer tone of voice, a brief glance held a little longer, a remembered detail, or a casual check-in that feels unexpectedly personal. What makes this effect so powerful is that the brain often treats these tiny signals as meaningful proof of emotional significance. Most people assume attraction grows from big events or clear expressions of interest, yet the human mind is constantly scanning for signs of safety, care, and attention in the smallest interactions. When someone consistently delivers micro-level affection, the nervous system begins to register them as emotionally important long before any explicit bond is formed. This is where the effect becomes unsettling. A person may not realize they are becoming attached because nothing big has happened. There is no dramatic confession, no intense moment, no defining conversation. Instead, attachment builds through dozens of small experiences that barely register consciously but accumulate emotionally over time. What makes this phenomenon so creepy is how easily these micro-signals bypass logic. A simple habit of replying thoughtfully, noticing small changes in mood, or showing gentle consistency can feel deeply comforting. The brain begins associating that person with emotional ease, even if the connection is still in its early stages. The disturbing part is that microaffection is often underestimated precisely because of its size. Each gesture feels insignificant on its own, but the emotional system does not process them individually. It accumulates them, quietly building a sense of closeness that feels natural and unforced. This effect becomes even stronger because micro-affection creates expectation without awareness. The brain begins anticipating small moments of warmth, and when they appear consistently, they reinforce attachment without requiring dramatic emotional investment. The micro-affection effect reveals a hidden truth about attraction. Deep emotional bonds are often not formed through intensity, but through repetition of small, gentle signals that make someone feel consistently seen. Over time, these subtle moments can shape attachment so quietly that the person experiencing them may not realize how deeply they have already become emotionally connected. The shared reality effect. The shared reality effect is the unsettling psychological phenomenon where people become more emotionally attached when they believe someone else sees the world in the same way they do. It is not just about agreeing on facts, but about feeling that another person interprets experiences, emotions, and meaning in a similar internal way. What makes this effect so powerful is that it creates a sense of deep connection that feels almost invisible while it is forming. Most people assume attraction is driven by external similarities like hobbies, appearance, or interests. Yet the human mind is constantly searching for something deeper. Validation of perception. When someone reacts to a situation the same way you do, laughs at the same moments, feels uncomfortable at the same things, or interprets silence the same way, the brain begins to register them as emotionally aligned. This is where the effect becomes unsettling. A person may feel an immediate sense of closeness not because they know the other individual well, but because their interpretations feel synchronized. It creates the illusion that both minds are operating from the same emotional blueprint. What makes this phenomenon so creepy is how quickly it can generate intimacy. Shared reactions to small, ordinary moments can feel surprisingly significant. A glance, a comment, or a mutual understanding of something unspoken can create the impression of a profound bond even when very little actual history exists between the two people. The disturbing part is that shared reality often feels like proof of compatibility. When someone consistently mirrors your interpretations of the world, the brain begins to assume deeper alignment must exist beneath the surface. This can lead to emotional investment long before real understanding has been established. This effect becomes even stronger in emotionally charged situations. When two people respond to stress, humor, discomfort, or joy in similar ways, the sense of "we experience the world together" intensifies. The mind starts treating that alignment as rare and meaningful. The shared reality effect reveals a hidden truth about attraction. People are not only drawn to those who see them, but also to those who seem to see the world exactly as they do. When perception feels shared, the brain quietly builds emotional closeness, turning mutual understanding into a powerful and often deeply persuasive form of connection. The Synchrony Effect. The Synchrony Effect is the unsettling psychological phenomenon where emotional attraction and bonding increase when two people unconsciously align their behaviors, movements, rhythms, or emotional states. This can include matching speech patterns, walking pace, breathing rhythm, gestures, or even emotional tone during conversation. What makes this effect so powerful is that the brain interprets synchronization as a sign of deep compatibility and connection. Most people believe attraction is built through words, shared interests, or meaningful experiences, yet beneath awareness, the human mind is constantly tracking timing and coordination. When two people move in sync, speak in similar rhythms, or respond to each other smoothly, the brain registers it as harmony. That sense of harmony often translates into emotional closeness. This is where the effect becomes unsettling. A simple conversation where two people naturally fall into the same pace can feel strangely comfortable. A shared laugh at the same moment, a mirrored pause, or matching emotional intensity can create the impression that something deeper is happening, even if the interaction is ordinary on the surface. What makes this phenomenon so creepy is how automatic it is. Synchrony often happens without intention. People begin mirroring each other unconsciously as attention increases. The more engaged they are, the more their behaviors begin to align, creating a feedback loop of connection that feels natural but powerful. The disturbing part is that the brain can interpret this alignment as emotional destiny. When someone feels in sync with another person, it can create a sense of uniqueness, as if they have found someone who operates on the same internal frequency. This feeling can quickly intensify attraction and emotional attachment. This effect becomes even stronger in close interactions where attention is high. Small details like nodding at the same time, reacting similarly, or sharing emotional peaks can deepen the sense of unity between two people. Over time, synchrony can make the connection feel effortless and almost inevitable. The synchrony effect reveals a hidden truth about attraction. The mind is not only drawn to what it understands, but also to what it moves in harmony with. When two people unconsciously align, the brain begins to interpret that rhythm as emotional connection, turning simple coordination into a powerful psychological signal of closeness. The humor bonding effect. The humor bonding effect is the unsettling psychological phenomenon where shared laughter creates a disproportionately strong sense of emotional closeness between two people. Humor is not just entertainment for the brain, it is a powerful social signal that indicates safety, understanding, and alignment. What makes this effect so powerful is that a simple moment of laughter can build emotional connection faster than long conversations or logical compatibility. Most people believe attraction is built through deep talks, shared values, or meaningful experiences, yet the human mind reacts strongly to humor because laughter lowers psychological defenses. When someone makes you laugh, your brain briefly relaxes its caution systems. In that moment of ease, the other person feels more familiar, more likable, and more emotionally safe. This is where the effect becomes unsettling. A shared joke, a silly comment, or an unexpected moment of humor can create a sudden shift in perception. The person who made you laugh begins to feel closer than they actually are in terms of real-life understanding. The emotional gap shrinks quickly because laughter creates an illusion of intimacy. What makes this phenomenon so creepy is how effortless it feels. People often do not realize that their emotional attachment is increasing during these light moments. They simply feel good, connected, and relaxed without recognizing that the brain is actively linking those positive emotions to the person creating them. The disturbing part is that humor creates memory anchors. Moments of shared laughter tend to be remembered more vividly than neutral interactions. Over time, these emotional highlights become reference points for the entire connection, shaping how someone is perceived in retrospect. This effect becomes even stronger when humor is personal or situational. Inside jokes, shared reactions, or moments that feel exclusive can create a sense of, we understand each other in a special way. The brain interprets that as emotional bonding, even if the relationship is still developing. The humor bonding effect reveals a hidden truth about attraction. Laughter is not just a reaction, but a connection-building signal. When two people laugh together, the mind quietly lowers barriers and increases emotional warmth, turning simple amusement into a powerful psychological force that can make someone feel unexpectedly important in another person's emotional world. The playfulness effect. The playfulness effect is the unsettling psychological phenomenon where attraction increases when interactions feel light, spontaneous, and emotionally unguarded. Playfulness removes pressure from communication, allowing people to behave in ways that feel more natural and less controlled. What makes this effect so powerful is that the brain often interprets playful energy as emotional safety and openness. Most people assume attraction grows from serious conversations, deep compatibility, or emotional intensity. Yet the human mind responds strongly to environments where there is no threat of judgment. When someone teases gently, jokes freely, or engages in light banter, it creates a space where the nervous system relaxes. In that relaxed state, emotional defenses begin to drop. This is where the effect becomes unsettling. A simple, playful exchange can quickly change how someone is perceived. A person who can shift the emotional tone from serious to light may suddenly feel more approachable, more attractive, and more emotionally engaging. The interaction feels effortless, even though something deeper is happening beneath the surface. What makes this phenomenon so creepy is how quickly playfulness can bypass rational evaluation. When people are laughing, teasing, or enjoying spontaneous moments, they are less focused on analyzing compatibility or logic. Instead, they are reacting emotionally in real time, which makes the experience feel more intimate than it actually is. The disturbing part is that playfulness creates a sense of emotional freedom. In that space, people often reveal more of themselves without realizing it. They respond more openly, engage more naturally, and become more emotionally expressive. This openness can accelerate feelings of closeness without any deliberate intention. This effect becomes even stronger when playfulness is mutual. When two people naturally match each other's energy, the interaction becomes fluid and engaging. The brain begins associating that ease with emotional compatibility, even if deeper understanding has not yet formed. The playfulness effect reveals a hidden truth about attraction. Emotional connection is not only built through seriousness, but also through moments of lightness where people feel free to be unguarded. In those moments, the mind quietly lowers its barriers, allowing simple play to evolve into unexpected emotional attachment. The eye contact effect. The eye contact effect is the unsettling psychological phenomenon where prolonged or meaningful eye contact can rapidly intensify emotional attraction and perceived connection between two people. The human brain treats eye contact as one of the most direct forms of emotional communication, often interpreting it as a signal of attention, interest, or even intimacy. What makes this effect so powerful is that it can create a sense of closeness without a single word being spoken. Most people assume attraction is built through conversation, shared experiences, or physical presence. Yet the brain is highly sensitive to where attention is directed. When someone holds your gaze, especially just a little longer than expected, it activates a deep awareness of being seen. That feeling can be emotionally intense because it bypasses language and goes straight into perception. This is where the effect becomes unsettling. A brief moment of eye contact during a conversation can feel normal, but when it lingers, something changes. The interaction becomes more personal. Time feels slightly slower. The other person's presence feels more significant. Even after the moment ends, the memory of it can stay unusually vivid. What makes this phenomenon so creepy is how much meaning the mind can project into a simple gaze. People often begin to interpret eye contact as evidence of attraction, understanding, or emotional depth. Yet in many cases, it is just a natural social behavior that the brain amplifies into something more meaningful. The disturbing part is that eye contact can create a sense of exposure. When someone looks directly into your eyes, it feels as if they are seeing beyond surface behavior. This can trigger both comfort and vulnerability at the same time, which intensifies emotional engagement. This effect becomes even stronger when eye contact is repeated in different moments. Each instance reinforces the impression of connection, gradually building emotional familiarity. Over time, the brain begins associating that person with heightened attention and emotional significance. The eye contact effect reveals a hidden truth about attraction. The simple act of being seen can feel deeply intimate. When two people hold each other's gaze, the mind can transform a brief moment of visual connection into a powerful emotional signal that feels far greater than its actual duration. The voice tone effect. The voice tone effect is the unsettling psychological phenomenon where attraction and emotional response are heavily influenced not by what someone says, but by how they say it. The human brain is highly sensitive to vocal tone, pace, pitch, and rhythm, often interpreting these subtle signals as indicators of emotional state, intention, and trustworthiness. What makes this effect so powerful is that a simple shift in voice can completely change how a person is perceived. Most people assume attraction is driven by words, logic, or shared interests, yet the brain processes emotional meaning far beyond language. A calm, steady voice can create a sense of safety. A warm tone can feel comforting. A playful tone can feel engaging. Even a slightly slower or softer delivery can make someone feel more emotionally present and attentive. This is where the effect becomes unsettling. Two people can say the exact same sentence, but the emotional impact can be completely different depending on tone. A neutral phrase can feel caring, distant, flirtatious, or cold simply based on vocal delivery. The brain fills in emotional meaning automatically, often without conscious awareness. What makes this phenomenon so creepy is how deeply it shapes attraction in real time. When someone speaks in a way that feels soothing or emotionally aligned, the listener may begin to feel unexpectedly connected. The voice becomes associated with comfort, understanding, or interest, even if no explicit emotional statement was made. The disturbing part is that tone can create an illusion of emotional intimacy. A person may feel deeply understood simply because the other individual speaks in a way that matches their emotional expectations. The connection feels real, but part of it is being constructed by auditory cues rather than actual emotional depth. This effect becomes even stronger in close conversations where attention is focused. Small changes in pitch, pauses, or emphasis can subtly guide emotional interpretation. Over time, the brain begins to associate certain voices with emotional safety or attraction, making that person's presence feel increasingly significant. The voice tone effect reveals a hidden truth about attraction. People are not only influenced by words, but by the emotional texture behind them. The way someone speaks can quietly bypass logic, shaping feelings of closeness, trust, and desire in ways that feel natural, immediate, and surprisingly difficult to resist. The touch warmth effect. The touch warmth effect is the unsettling psychological phenomenon where even brief, seemingly insignificant physical contact can dramatically increase feelings of trust, emotional closeness, and attraction. The human skin is one of the most sensitive emotional gateways in the body, and the brain often interprets touch as a signal that goes far beyond physical interaction. What makes this effect so powerful is that a moment of contact can leave an emotional imprint that lasts far longer than the touch itself. Most people assume attraction is built through words, shared experiences, or emotional compatibility, yet the nervous system responds instantly to physical touch. A light touch on the arm, a gentle tap during laughter, or a brief moment of accidental contact can trigger a subtle shift in emotional perception. The brain reads it as warmth, familiarity, and increased social safety. This is where the effect becomes unsettling. A single moment of appropriate, non-threatening touch can suddenly change the tone of an interaction. The conversation may feel more relaxed. The person may feel more approachable. Emotional distance can shrink without either individual realizing why the dynamic has changed. What makes this phenomenon so creepy is how deeply the body records it. Even when the mind does not consciously focus on the touch, the nervous system registers it as a meaningful social cue. That signal becomes associated with the person who initiated it, subtly influencing how they are remembered and perceived later. The disturbing part is that touch creates a shortcut to emotional bonding. It bypasses some of the slower cognitive processes involved in trust building. Instead of analyzing behavior over time, the brain reacts immediately to physical warmth as a sign of safety or familiarity. This effect becomes even stronger when touch is paired with positive emotion, such as laughter or shared excitement. In those moments, the brain links physical contact with emotional reward, amplifying the sense of connection. The touch warmth effect reveals a hidden truth about attraction. Human beings are not only influenced by what they see or hear, but also by what they physically feel. Even the smallest moment of touch can quietly reshape emotional boundaries, making someone feel closer, more trusted, and more emotionally significant than the interaction alone might suggest. The personal space effect. The personal space effect is the unsettling psychological phenomenon where attraction, comfort, and emotional response are strongly influenced by how close someone is allowed to enter your physical space. The human brain treats personal space as an invisible boundary tied to safety, trust, and emotional permission. What makes this effect so powerful is that even small changes in distance can completely alter how someone is perceived. Most people assume attraction is shaped mainly by conversation, appearance, or shared interests. Yet the nervous system is constantly evaluating proximity. When someone stands slightly closer than expected, the brain immediately registers it as meaningful. If that closeness feels comfortable rather than threatening, it can create a subtle sense of emotional connection. This is where the effect becomes unsettling. A person who is allowed into closer physical range often feels more familiar and more significant over time. Conversations in close proximity tend to feel more intimate, even when nothing personal is being discussed. The simple act of reduced distance changes the emotional tone of the interaction. What makes this phenomenon so creepy is how quickly the brain adapts. Once a certain level of closeness is accepted, it becomes the new baseline. What once felt close begins to feel normal, and emotional comfort adjusts accordingly. The mind quietly recalibrates its sense of safe distance based on repeated exposure. The disturbing part is that personal space is deeply tied to emotional trust. When someone consistently respects boundaries or is gradually allowed closer, the brain interprets this as a sign of safety and acceptance. That interpretation can increase attraction without any conscious reasoning. This effect becomes even stronger in emotionally charged moments. When proximity increases during laughter, conversation, or shared experiences, the brain links closeness with positive emotion. Over time, physical nearness becomes associated with comfort and emotional significance. The personal space effect reveals a hidden truth about attraction. Distance is not just physical, but psychological. The closer someone is allowed into your space, the more the mind begins to treat them as emotionally important, quietly turning proximity into a powerful signal of connection and trust. The body language congruence effect. The body language congruence effect is the unsettling psychological phenomenon where attraction and emotional trust increase when a person's body language aligns naturally with their words and emotional tone. The human brain is constantly scanning for consistency between verbal communication and physical expression. And what makes this effect so powerful is that even subtle alignment can create a strong sense of honesty and emotional safety. Most people assume attraction is based on what someone says or how they look. Yet the brain pays close attention to what is not spoken. Posture, facial expression, gestures, eye movement, and timing all combine to create a hidden layer of communication. When these signals match the spoken message, the mind interprets it as authenticity. This is where the effect becomes unsettling. A simple statement can feel completely different depending on whether the body supports it. When words and body language are in harmony, the interaction feels natural and believable. When they are slightly misaligned, even in subtle ways, the brain may register discomfort or emotional distance without knowing why. What makes this phenomenon so creepy is how quickly people form judgments based on it. Within moments, the brain begins deciding whether someone feels trustworthy or emotionally genuine. Congruent body language reduces suspicion and increases comfort, often making the person feel more attractive and emotionally approachable. The disturbing part is that this effect operates mostly beneath awareness. People rarely consciously analyze gestures or posture, yet they still react to them emotionally. A relaxed stance, open posture, steady eye contact, and matching emotional expression can all signal safety and sincerity, shaping attraction without explicit reasoning. This effect becomes even stronger when emotional expression is involved. When someone's face, voice, and body all communicate the same feeling, the brain experiences a sense of clarity and ease. That clarity is often interpreted as emotional honesty. The body language congruence effect reveals a hidden truth about attraction. People are not only listening to words, but constantly evaluating whether the entire body tells the same story. When everything aligns, the mind lowers its defenses, quietly transforming consistency into trust and trust into emotional connection. The first impression effect. The first impression effect is the unsettling psychological phenomenon where the initial moments of meeting someone can disproportionately shape how they are perceived long after the interaction ends. The human brain forms rapid judgments within seconds, and those early impressions often act as a filter through which all future behavior is interpreted. What makes this effect so powerful is that it can anchor attraction or aversion before any real understanding has developed. Most people assume they evaluate others objectively over time, yet the brain is wired for speed, not accuracy. When meeting someone new, it quickly constructs an initial emotional snapshot based on appearance, tone, body language, confidence, and subtle social cues. This snapshot becomes the foundation for all later interpretation, even when new information contradicts it. This is where the effect becomes unsettling. A strong first impression can make neutral or even ordinary behavior seem more positive than it actually is. Likewise, a negative first impression can cause even genuine kindness to be overlooked or misread. The mind continuously tries to confirm what it already decided early on, rather than rebuilding its judgment from scratch. What makes this phenomenon so creepy is how permanent early emotional framing can feel. A single moment of awkwardness, confidence, warmth, or discomfort can influence how someone is remembered for a long time. The brain does not easily erase first impressions. Instead, it adjusts new experiences to fit them. The disturbing part is that attraction is often heavily shaped in those first few seconds. Before meaningful conversation begins, the brain may already be leaning toward interest or disinterest. Every later interaction is then filtered through that initial emotional lens. This effect becomes even stronger because people naturally seek consistency. The mind prefers to maintain its original interpretation rather than constantly revise it. As a result, early impressions become self-reinforcing over time. The first impression effect reveals a hidden truth about attraction. The beginning of an interaction often carries more weight than everything that follows. The mind quietly locks onto early signals, turning brief initial moments into lasting emotional frameworks that shape how someone is perceived long after the first encounter has passed. The Primacy Effect. The Primacy Effect is the unsettling psychological phenomenon where people remember and are influenced more by the information they encounter first, rather than what they learn later. In attraction, this means the earliest details about a person often carry disproportionate emotional weight, quietly shaping perception long after new information has been introduced. Most people believe their opinions about someone evolve evenly over time. Yet the human brain does not process information in a neutral sequence. It prioritizes beginnings. The first traits noticed about someone, confidence, awkwardness, warmth, distance, charm, or hesitation, tend to become the reference point for everything that follows. This is where the effect becomes unsettling. If the first impression of someone is positive, the mind naturally interprets later flaws more gently, almost as exceptions to an overall positive image. But if the first impression is negative, even genuine kindness or attractive behavior can be mentally discounted or reinterpreted in a less favorable light. What makes this phenomenon so creepy is how quietly it shapes emotional bias. A person may believe they are judging someone fairly in the present moment, while in reality, their brain is still anchored to what it registered first. Every new interaction is unconsciously compared against that initial emotional frame. The disturbing part is that attraction itself can be heavily influenced by timing rather than truth. The first moments of interaction can quietly decide whether someone feels intriguing or forgettable, trustworthy or uncertain, attractive or average. Once that early frame is set, the mind works to preserve it. This effect becomes even stronger because the brain prefers stability in its judgments. Constantly rewriting opinions requires mental effort, so it defaults to reinforcing early conclusions unless there is overwhelming evidence to change them. The Primacy Effect reveals a hidden truth about attraction. What comes first often matters more than what comes later. The mind quietly builds emotional foundations in the earliest moments of interaction, turning initial impressions into lasting filters that shape how every subsequent detail is understood and remembered. The Recency Effect. The Recency Effect is the unsettling psychological phenomenon where people place greater emotional weight on the most recent interactions they have had with someone, often allowing those final moments to reshape how the entire relationship is remembered. While earlier experiences matter, the human brain has a strong tendency to prioritize what is fresh in memory, especially when emotions are involved. Most people assume their perception of a person is stable and balanced over time, yet the mind does not store experiences evenly. It compresses emotional history and highlights what is most accessible at the moment. The last conversation, the final interaction, or the most recent emotional exchange can quietly override months or even years of previous experience. This is where the effect becomes unsettling. A relationship that was mostly positive can feel different if the last interaction was painful, distant, or emotionally charged. Conversely, a relationship that was inconsistent or even difficult can suddenly feel more meaningful if the final moment was warm, emotional, or comforting. What makes this phenomenon so creepy is how it can silently rewrite emotional conclusions. The brain uses the most recent experience as a shortcut for deciding how to feel now. That final moment becomes an emotional anchor, coloring everything that came before it. The disturbing part is that people often believe their feelings are based on the entire history of a connection, when in reality, their emotions may be disproportionately influenced by what just happened. The last impression can become the most emotionally powerful, even if it represents only a small part of the overall experience. This effect becomes even stronger because emotional memory is highly sensitive to timing. Recent experiences are easier to recall and feel more relevant, so the brain naturally gives them more authority when forming judgments about a person. The recency effect reveals a hidden truth about attraction. The end of an interaction can sometimes matter more than everything that led up to it. The mind quietly allows the latest emotional moment to dominate perception, turning recent experiences into powerful filters that reshape how the entire connection is remembered and felt. The similar values effect. The similar values effect is the unsettling psychological phenomenon where attraction deepens when two people believe they share the same core beliefs, principles, and life priorities. Unlike surface-level similarities such as hobbies or interests, values operate at a deeper emotional level, shaping identity, decisions, and how someone interprets the world. What makes this effect so powerful is that it creates the feeling of emotional alignment that the brain often interprets as rare and significant. Most people assume attraction comes from chemistry or shared experiences, yet the human mind is constantly evaluating whether another person sees life in a compatible way. When someone appears to value the same things, loyalty, ambition, honesty, family, freedom, stability, or growth, the brain begins to treat that person as emotionally safe and intellectually familiar. This is where the effect becomes unsettling. Even a brief conversation can reveal perceived alignment in values, and that perception alone can dramatically influence attraction. A person may feel deeply understood simply because the other individual agrees with their worldview or reacts to moral and emotional situations in a similar way. What makes this phenomenon so creepy is how quickly it can create a sense of deep connection. When values seem aligned, the mind starts filling in the gaps, assuming broader compatibility exists across other areas of life. This can create the impression of a strong bond long before the relationship is fully explored. The disturbing part is that perceived similarity in values can sometimes outweigh actual knowledge of the person. The brain prioritizes emotional alignment over detailed understanding, leading people to feel closer than they truly are. Agreement feels like validation, and validation feels like connection. This effect becomes even stronger because values are tied to identity. When someone reflects your beliefs, it can feel as though they are reflecting part of who you are. That reflection creates emotional comfort and a sense of belonging. The similar values effect reveals a hidden truth about attraction. People are often drawn not only to who someone is, but to who they believe that person agrees with them about being. When values appear aligned, the mind quietly constructs emotional closeness, turning shared beliefs into one of the strongest foundations for perceived connection. The shared goals effect. The shared goals effect is the unsettling psychological phenomenon where attraction and emotional bonding increase when two people believe they are working toward the same future outcomes. These goals can be as simple as planning a project together or as deep as imagining long-term life direction. What makes this effect so powerful is that shared direction creates the illusion of shared destiny, even when emotional intimacy is still developing. Most people assume attraction is built through chemistry or compatibility in the present moment, yet the human mind is heavily influenced by imagined futures. When someone begins to see another person as part of their plans, their decisions, routines, and expectations begin to subtly adjust around that person's presence. This is where the effect becomes unsettling. A simple conversation about future intentions can create a strong sense of connection. Even small alignments, like wanting similar lifestyles, ambitions, or outcomes, can make someone feel significantly more important than they were moments before. What makes this phenomenon so creepy is how quickly shared direction can create emotional attachment. The brain begins to treat cooperation as emotional closeness. Working together towards something creates a sense of unity, and unity often gets misinterpreted as deep relational bonding. The disturbing part is that the feeling of "we are building something together" can become emotionally powerful even before a real foundation exists. The mind begins associating the other person with future stability, success, or fulfillment, which increases their perceived importance in the present. This effect becomes even stronger when goals require coordination. Planning, problem-solving, and mutual decision-making create repeated moments of alignment. Each successful coordination reinforces the sense that both people are moving in the same emotional and psychological direction. The shared goals effect reveals a hidden truth about attraction. People are often drawn not just to who someone is, but to the future they believe they can build with them. The mind quietly bonds through imagined direction, turning shared intention into emotional attachment and making alignment feel like a powerful form of connection. The future pacing effect. The future pacing effect is the unsettling psychological phenomenon where attraction and emotional attachment intensify when two people mentally imagine a shared future together. The human brain does not treat imagined experiences as completely separate from real ones. When someone repeatedly visualizes future moments with another person, the mind begins to respond emotionally as if those experiences are already partially real. Most people assume attraction is grounded in present interaction. Yet the brain is constantly simulating future scenarios. It imagines conversations, meetings, routines, and shared experiences. When another person becomes consistently present in those mental projections, they start to feel emotionally significant in the present moment. This is where the effect becomes unsettling. A simple conversation about what could happen or what it would be like can subtly shift emotional perception. Even casual statements about future plans, travel, routines, or possibilities can trigger the mind to begin integrating that person into imagined life scenarios. What makes this phenomenon so creepy is how easily imagination begins influencing reality. The brain starts rehearsing emotional responses to situations that have not happened yet. The more vividly someone is pictured in those future scenes, the more familiar and emotionally important they begin to feel now. The disturbing part is that emotional attachment can grow without any real-world progression. A person may feel increasingly connected to someone simply because they repeatedly imagine a shared future with them. The mind starts treating those imagined moments as emotional evidence of closeness. This effect becomes even stronger because future thinking activates anticipation. Anticipation itself is emotionally rewarding. The expectation of shared experiences can produce feelings of excitement, comfort, and attachment long before anything actually occurs. The future pacing effect reveals a hidden truth about attraction. The mind does not only respond to what is happening, but also to what it repeatedly envisions. When two people become part of each other's imagined future, the brain quietly begins to treat that vision as emotional reality, turning possibility into a powerful form of present attachment. The couple identity effect. The couple identity effect is the unsettling psychological phenomenon where two people begin to see themselves less as separate individuals and more as a combined unit. The brain slowly shifts from thinking in me and you terms to thinking in us terms. What makes this effect so powerful is that identity itself begins to merge through repeated emotional, social, and behavioral synchronization. Most people assume attraction is about liking another person. Yet the human mind is also highly responsive to identity formation. When someone starts being consistently treated, referred to, or experienced as part of a pair, the brain begins constructing a shared identity. This can happen through small patterns like shared routines, mutual habits, or even the way others refer to them as a couple. This is where the effect becomes unsettling. A simple change in language or behavior can begin reinforcing the idea of unity, saying we instead of I, making joint decisions, or being seen together repeatedly all contribute to the brain building a psychological model of partnership. Over time, that model starts to feel natural and automatic. What makes this phenomenon so creepy is how identity can shift without conscious awareness. A person may not realize how much their decisions, emotions, and priorities begin aligning with someone else's. The mind slowly adjusts preferences and expectations to maintain coherence with the emerging couple identity. The disturbing part is that once this identity forms, it can influence perception of reality. Individual choices may start feeling incomplete without the other person's input. Emotional reactions become more interdependent. Even thinking about the future may default to including the other person automatically. This effect becomes even stronger because shared identity creates emotional stability. The sense of being part of a unit reduces uncertainty and strengthens attachment. The brain prefers this clarity, so it reinforces behaviors that maintain the together structure. The couple identity effect reveals a hidden truth about attraction. People are not only drawn to each other as individuals, but also to the identity they begin to form together. When the mind starts processing two lives as one narrative, emotional attachment deepens quietly, turning connection into a shared sense of self that feels increasingly difficult to separate. The emotional availability effect. The emotional availability effect is the unsettling psychological phenomenon where attraction increases when someone feels emotionally open, responsive, and present in moments of connection. Emotional availability is not just about being kind or attentive. It is about being mentally and emotionally accessible in a way that allows another person to feel truly received. What makes this effect so powerful is that the brain often interprets emotional openness as rare and deeply significant. Most people assume attraction is based on appearance, chemistry, or shared interests. Yet beneath those surface elements, the mind is constantly scanning for emotional accessibility. When someone listens without distraction, responds with genuine understanding, and seems present in the interaction, the nervous system begins to relax. That sense of relaxation can quickly evolve into emotional attachment. This is where the effect becomes unsettling. A person who is consistently emotionally available can begin to feel unusually important in someone's inner world. Conversations feel more meaningful. Silence feels more comfortable. Even small interactions begin carrying emotional weight because the brain associates that person with being safe to feel around. What makes this phenomenon so creepy is how quickly emotional availability can reshape perception. The mind begins linking the person with relief from emotional tension. Instead of having to guard thoughts or filter feelings, the other person becomes a space where openness feels natural. That experience can create strong attachment even before deeper compatibility is fully understood. The disturbing part is that emotional availability is often mistaken for compatibility itself. When someone consistently responds with care and attention, the brain can interpret that as evidence of a deeper bond. Even if the connection is still developing, emotional ease starts to feel like emotional destiny. This effect becomes even stronger because emotional presence is experienced in real time. Every moment of attention, validation, or understanding reinforces the association. The brain quietly stores these interactions as proof of significance, gradually increasing attachment without requiring dramatic events. The emotional availability effect reveals a hidden truth about attraction. People are often drawn not only to who someone is, but to how emotionally reachable they feel. When someone consistently offers presence and openness, the mind begins to treat them as emotionally essential, turning availability itself into a powerful driver of attachment.